A grenade explodes in his hand. 200 Japanese soldiers charge. He grabs his rifle with his left hand and starts killing. One man, one hand, 4 hours. When dawn broke, 31 enemy soldiers lay dead around his trench. This is impossible, but it happened. May 1945. His right hand is gone. His eye destroyed. Blood everywhere. 200 enemies closing in. Any soldier would die here. He refused. How does a wounded man with one hand stop 200 soldiers? The answer lies in a muddy trench in Burma and the Gurkha code. They said he was too short, too small, too weak. On May 12, 1945, one 4'11" Gurkha proved them all wrong forever. Better to die than be a coward. That's the Gurkha motto. One night in 1945, one man proved it wasn't just words, it was reality. December 1917. High in the mountains of Nepal, in a village called Dakani, a boy is born. His name is Lashiman Gurung. His father farms a tiny piece of land, barely enough to feed the family. Life here means one thing: poverty with no way out. But nobody in this village knows that this boy will one day do something that military historians will call impossible. Young Lashiman grows up hearing stories about Gurkhas, Nepalese soldiers who serve in the British Indian Army. These men are legends. They carry curved kukri knives. They're trained to never surrender. British commanders say one Gurkha is worth 10 regular soldiers. German troops in World War I learned to fear them in the trenches of France. Every Gurkha lives by one motto: better to die than be a coward. In 1945, one man will prove those aren't just words. 4 young men in these mountain villages, there are only 2 choices: farm like your father or join the Gurkhas. The army offers steady pay, respect, and a way to escape poverty. But joining requires passing brutal tests and meeting one requirement: you must be at least 5 feet tall. Lashiman Gurung stands 4'11", 1 inch too short. December 1940. 23-year-old Lashiman walks to the British recruitment station. World War II is exploding across the globe. Germany controls most of Europe. Japan is preparing to sweep through Asia. Britain needs soldiers desperately. The height requirements are quietly relaxed. Gurung is accepted. He joins the 4th Battalion, 8th Gurkha Rifles, one of the most legendary regiments in the British Indian Army. Here's what nobody tells him. In exactly 5 years, on one night in Burma, this 4'11" soldier will face 200 enemy soldiers. His right hand will be blown off, his right eye destroyed, and he will kill 31 of them with one hand. The training begins. The war is waiting, and hell is coming to Burma. 1944. Burma. This is where soldiers go to die. The jungle is so thick you can't see 20 feet ahead. Monsoon rains fall every day, turning everything into mud. Diseases, malaria, dysentery, typhoid, kill as many men as bullets do. And the Imperial Japanese Army, who've conquered half of Asia, they don't retreat. They don't surrender. They fight to the death. Rifleman Lashiman Gurung is here now, part of the Burma campaign. His 8th Gurkha Rifles are pushing through this nightmare, fighting through swamps, crossing rivers, climbing jungle-covered hills. Every step forward means ambushes, snipers hidden in trees, enemies who'd rather die than give up an inch of ground. The Japanese have a reputation that terrifies Allied soldiers. In one battle, Gurkhas found a Japanese position where officers had shot their own wounded men rather than let them be captured. That's the enemy Gurung faces every single day. By May 1945, the Japanese position in Burma is collapsing. Allied forces have them surrounded. But cornered animals are the most dangerous. Intelligence reports say scattered Japanese units are trying to break out, desperate, violent, willing to kill anyone in their path. May 9, 1945. The 4th Battalion receives orders: move to Tongda village and block the Japanese withdrawal routes. Stop them from escaping. The Gurkhas dig defensive positions on a hillside. The trenches are good, overlapping fields of fire, clear approaches. But there's a problem. Someone has to man the forward position, a trench 100 yards ahead of the main line. It's a suicide post. The first position the enemy will hit. The hardest to defend. The most likely to be overrun. Nobody wants to go there. Everyone knows it's a death sentence. 3 Gurkhas are assigned to that forward trench. One of them is Lashiman Gurung. He's 27 years old, 4'11" tall. He's been trained for this. But nothing prepares you for what's about to happen. Gurung walks to that forward trench. He deepens it. piles sandbags, clears the field of fire. He places his kukri knife on the edge of the trench within arm's reach. If the Japanese get close enough, he'll need that knife. May 12th. Night falls over the jungle, and in the darkness they hear it, movement. Lots of movement. Footsteps crunching through the undergrowth. Equipment rattling. Whispered commands in Japanese. At least 200 Japanese soldiers are moving toward their position, and they're coming straight for Gurung's trench. 3 Gurkha riflemen crouch in a muddy trench. The jungle around them is pitch black. Behind them, 100 yards back, the rest of C Company waits in their trenches. Ahead of them, hidden in the darkness, at least 200 Japanese soldiers are moving closer. Rifleman Gurung grips his Lee Enfield rifle. He can hear them now, footsteps, equipment, whispered orders. The Japanese aren't trying to hide anymore. They know where the British trenches are. They've scouted the position during the day, and now they're preparing for a full assault. This isn't a patrol. This isn't a probe. This is a mass attack designed to break through the entire British perimeter, to overwhelm the defenders with grenades and gunfire, to slaughter 2 companies of surrounded Gurkhas. And the entire Japanese assault is aimed at one spot, Gurung's forward trench. Behind him, Section Commander Naik Debising Bureau watches from his trench. He can barely see Gurung's position in the darkness. But he knows the truth. If that forward trench falls, everyone dies. The Japanese will break through. They'll roll up the flank. The entire defense will collapse. Everything depends on 3 men holding that position. 1:20 a.m. Bureau orders all his men to stand to in their trenches. Weapons ready. Safety's off. Eyes straining in the darkness. The sounds from the jungle are getting louder. The Japanese are close now. Very close. And then it happens. A grenade arcs through the night sky. It lands just outside Gurung's trench. Most soldiers would dive for cover and pray. Gurung doesn't. He reaches out, grabs the grenade with his bare hands and throws it back toward the enemy. Boom. The explosion lights up the jungle for 1 second. In that brief flash of light, Gurung sees them, dozens of Japanese soldiers maybe 40 yards away rushing forward with rifles and bayonets, screaming. Another grenade falls inside his trench. Gurung grabs it, hurls it out. It explodes in midair. The Japanese are getting closer. 30 yards now. Machine guns firing. More grenades falling like rain. A wave of death rolling toward 3 men in a hole in the ground. A third grenade arcs down through the darkness. It lands right at Gurung's feet. He bends down without thinking. His fingers close around the metal, and it explodes in his hand. The blast is immediate and catastrophic. His fingers are blown off. His right hand is destroyed, just a mangled mess of blood and shattered bone. Shrapnel rips into his face, taking his right eye. Burns cover his right arm and chest. Blood pours from dozens of wounds. The 2 other Gurkhas in the trench are wounded by the same explosion. All 3 men are bleeding, disoriented, in shock. And 200 Japanese soldiers are 5 seconds away from overrunning the position. Any normal human being would collapse right here. Would fall unconscious from shock and blood loss. Would accept death. Rifleman Gurung, with his right hand destroyed, his right eye gone, blood covering his face, reaches down with his left hand, grabs his rifle, and does something that every military expert says should be physically impossible. He starts killing Japanese soldiers. The Lee Enfield rifle weighs 9 pounds. It's designed to be fired with 2 hands, right hand on the trigger, left hand supporting the barrel. The bolt action requires the right hand to cycle rounds between shots. You pull the bolt up, pull it back, push it forward, push it down. Then you can fire again. Rifleman Gurung's right hand no longer exists. Most soldiers would look at this situation and understand, it's over. You can't operate a bolt-action rifle with 1 hand. It's physically impossible. The weapon is useless. Gurung doesn't see it that way. He braces the rifle against his left hip. He wraps his left hand around the bolt. He aims with his 1 remaining eye. His right eye is gone, just a bleeding socket. And he starts working the bolt with his left hand while keeping the rifle steady against his body. Fire. Work the bolt. Fire. Work the bolt. The Japanese soldiers rushing toward his trench expect to find dead or dying defenders. They expect to overrun the position in seconds. What they find instead is a Gurkha rifleman who is shooting back, accurately, rapidly, killing the lead attackers, and screaming at them in Gurkhali, telling them to come fight. challenging them, refusing to die. The shock of it stops the Japanese advance for a few precious seconds. Long enough for Gurung to kill several more soldiers. Long enough for confusion to ripple through the Japanese ranks. This wasn't supposed to happen. The grenade went off. The defenders should be dead. But the Japanese officers recover quickly. They adjust. More grenades fall into and around Gurung's trench. He can't throw them back anymore. His right hand is destroyed. He presses himself against the trench wall. Lets the explosions wash over him. Takes more shrapnel wounds. More burns. Keeps firing. The Japanese try rushing the position. 3 soldiers charge straight at his trench. Gurung shoots them down one after another. The bodies fall in front of his position. The dead become obstacles that slow down the living. Behind Gurung, Section Commander Naik Debasing Bura watches from his trench 100 yards back. He can't believe what he's seeing. He's seen combat before. He's seen Gurkhas fight with incredible courage. But this is something beyond normal courage. This is a wounded man who should be incapacitated, fighting with the effectiveness of a full-strength squad. Bura tries to send men forward to reinforce Gurung's position. The Japanese fire is too intense. Anyone who tries to reach that forward trench gets cut down before covering half the distance. So Gurung fights alone. One man, one eye, one hand, against 200 Japanese soldiers who are determined to break through his position. The physical challenges are almost incomprehensible. Operating a bolt-action rifle one-handed while aiming and firing requires strength, coordination, and practice that Gurung never trained for. He's learning it in real time, under fire, while bleeding from dozens of wounds, while half-blind, while Japanese soldiers try to kill him every single second. The pain must be excruciating. The destroyed hand, the ruined eye, the shrapnel embedded in his body, the burns. Combat injuries produce shock. Blood loss causes weakness. Most soldiers would pass out from the trauma. Gurung stays conscious through sheer willpower. He has a job: hold the trench, stop the Japanese, protect his brothers in arms. Everything else is secondary, including his own survival. The Japanese can't understand what's happening. They outnumber the defenders at least 50-1. They're attacking the weakest point in the British line. They have surprise and momentum. And one wounded Gurkha is stopping their entire assault. Japanese officers try to rally their men, push forward, overrun that cursed trench. Every attempt meets the same result: rifle fire, dead soldiers, and a voice screaming defiance from that forward position. Come and fight a Gurkha. The attackers change tactics. They try flanking the trench. Gurung shifts his fire, covers the approaches. The jungle terrain limits the angles of attack. The narrow front means the Japanese can't bring overwhelming force to bear all at once. They have to approach through killing zones. And Gurung covers every single one. The battlefield is pitch black except when explosions briefly light up the carnage. Gurung is firing at muzzle flashes, at sounds, at shadows. Hitting targets he can barely see with a rifle he can barely operate. Naik Bura later tries to describe what he witnessed. He says Gurung fought like something beyond human. Every few seconds, another Japanese soldier falls. The enemy can't locate exactly where Gurung is firing from. The muzzle flash of his rifle moves as he shifts position within his trench. The Japanese fire wildly at where they think he is. Most of their rounds miss. Gurung's rounds don't miss. He's a trained rifleman. Even one-handed and half-blind, he's more accurate than soldiers who can see and have both hands. Time becomes meaningless. The battle is a continuous roar of gunfire, explosions, and screaming. Gurung fires until his rifle is empty. Reloads with his left hand, a process that normally requires 2 hands and takes a few seconds. One-handed, it takes longer. Every second of reloading is a second the Japanese can advance. Gurung learns to reload faster. Fumbles cartridges in the darkness. Loads them by feel. Gets the rifle back into action. Starts firing again. The process repeats hundreds of times through the night. The Japanese throw more grenades. Gurung can't avoid them all. More shrapnel wounds. More pain. He keeps fighting. Blood loss is weakening him. His vision is failing from shock and injury. He can feel himself fading. But the Japanese are still attacking. If he stops fighting, they break through. His brothers die. The thought is unacceptable. He fires another round. And another. And another. Ammunition becomes critical. Gurung started the battle with a basic load, 50 rounds in his pouches, 10 in his rifle. He's been firing steadily. Each shot has to count. He can't waste rounds, but he also can't let the Japanese close the distance. It's a razor's edge. Shoot enough to keep them at bay. Conserve enough to keep fighting until dawn or reinforcements arrive. He has no idea how much ammunition he has left. He just keeps firing until the rifle is empty, then reloads, then fires again. Around 3 a.m., the intensity of the Japanese attack increases. This isn't desperation. This is a coordinated push. Officers have rallied their men for one more attempt to break through. They come at Gurung's position from multiple angles, throwing grenades, firing machine guns, rushing forward, accepting casualties, determined to overrun that single defended position that has stopped them for over an hour. Gurung meets them with the same response: rifle fire, controlled, accurate, relentless. Japanese soldiers fall. The assault breaks against his trench like a wave against a cliff. 4 a.m. The Japanese attacks are losing momentum. The officers can't rally their men for another push. Too many casualties. Too many bodies in front of that cursed trench. Too much fear of the unseen demon who won't die and won't stop killing. The attackers pull back, regroup, try to figure out what to do. They still outnumber the defenders massively. But numbers don't matter if they can't bring them to bear. And bringing them to bear means advancing through Gurung's killing zone. Nobody wants to be the next soldier to die in front of that trench. Gurung uses the lull to take stock. He's barely conscious. Blood loss and shock are taking their toll. His right hand hangs useless, just a destroyed stump. His right eye is gone. Shrapnel wounds cover his body. Every movement brings fresh agony. He feels for cartridges in his pouches. Not many left. Maybe enough for one more attack. Maybe not. He doesn't think about medical attention. Doesn't think about evacuation. Just watches the darkness. Waits for the next assault. Keeps his rifle ready. Behind him, the rest of C Company is holding their positions. They can hear the battle at Gurung's trench. They try to provide supporting fire, but the darkness and jungle limit what they can do. Naik Bura reports the situation to his company commander. One rifleman holding the forward post alone, heavily wounded, still fighting, stopping an entire Japanese assault. The commander doesn't believe it at first. Then he listens to the pattern of fire. Single rifle shots. Controlled. Precise. Coming from that forward position. Still holding. Still fighting. Reinforcements can't reach Gurung. The Japanese control the ground between his trench and the main line. Any relief attempt would be wiped out. So Gurung stays alone. Outnumbered. Wounded. Running out of ammunition. But still holding. As dawn approaches, the Japanese try one final assault. This is desperation. They need to break through before daylight, before Allied aircraft can spot them, before reinforcements arrive. They gather their remaining strength. Charge Gurung's position one more time. Screaming. Firing everything they had. Accepting that many would die. Believing that sheer numbers would finally overwhelm that single defender. Lashiman Gurung meets them with his last rounds of ammunition. He fires until the rifle is empty. Then he grabs his kukri knife, the curved blade that every Gurkha carries. If the Japanese reach his trench, he'll kill them with steel. One-handed, half-blind, bleeding out. He will fight with that knife until they kill him or he kills them all. Better to die than be a coward. But the Japanese assault breaks before reaching his trench. The final charge falters. Attackers fall. The survivors pull back into the jungle. Dawn is breaking. The darkness that concealed them is fading. Staying means being caught in the open. Being slaughtered by Allied aircraft and artillery. The Japanese withdraw. Melt back into the jungle. Leave their dead behind. Retreat from a position they should have overrun in minutes. As the sun rises on May 13th, Naik Bura and other Gurkhas rush forward to Gurung's trench. They expect to find him dead. No one could survive that long under such intense attack while so badly wounded. But Lashiman Gurung is alive. Barely. Sitting in his trench, surrounded by empty shell casings. His rifle in his lap. His kukri knife on the parapet within reach. His right hand destroyed. His right eye gone. Blood everywhere. He's still conscious. Still watching the jungle. Still ready to fight if the Japanese come back. Bura and the others pull him from the trench. Give him water. apply field dressings to his wounds. Then they look around the trench, and they count. 31 dead Japanese soldiers lie within a few yards of Gurung's position. 31 confirmed kills, all shot by one man, with one hand, in 4 hours of continuous combat. One Gurkha, against 200 enemy soldiers, and he held. Medical evacuation comes quickly. Gurung is carried to the rear on a stretcher. He's lost massive amounts of blood. His body is riddled with shrapnel. His burns need immediate treatment, but he's conscious the entire time. Field surgeons work on him for hours. They assess the damage and it's catastrophic. His right hand is beyond saving. The grenade blast destroyed the fingers, shattered the bones, mangled the palm. There's nothing left to work with. The surgeons amputate what remains. Just the stump where his right hand used to be. His right eye is permanently blind. The shrapnel destroyed it completely. No surgery can bring it back. Shrapnel fragments are embedded throughout his body. His face, his chest, his arms, his legs. The surgeons remove what they can, but some pieces are too deep. They'll stay in his body for the rest of his life. The burns covering his right arm and chest are treated. 3rd degree in some places. The scars will never fade, but he'll survive. Against every medical expectation, Lashiman Gurung will live. While Gurung is being treated, other Gurkhas examine the battlefield around his trench. What they find astonishes them. 31 dead Japanese soldiers within a few yards of his position. 31 confirmed kills. Blood trails show where wounded Japanese were dragged away by their comrades. Equipment scattered across the ground indicates many more casualties beyond the confirmed dead. Conservative estimates say Gurung wounded at least 20 more enemy soldiers. Some of those wounds were probably fatal. One man, fighting with one hand, stopped an assault by at least 200 soldiers. The physical evidence tells a story that seems impossible. But the bodies don't lie. Naik Debasingh Bura immediately writes a detailed report of what he witnessed. Every detail. Every moment. The grenade explosions. Gurung throwing back the first 2 grenades. The third one detonating in his hand. The 4 hours of continuous fighting. The one-handed rifle operation. The 31 dead enemy soldiers. The company commander endorses the report. Battalion command forwards it up the chain. This isn't just bravery. This is something that defines heroism at its highest level. One man holding an impossible position against overwhelming odds. Fighting despite catastrophic wounds. Never retreating. Never surrendering. Saving his entire company through sheer willpower and skill. If any action deserves the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration in the British Commonwealth, this is it. The recommendation goes to higher command. Then to British headquarters in India. Then to London. Meanwhile, Gurung recovers in military hospitals. The war is still going on. Japan hasn't surrendered yet. His fighting days are over, but the war continues around him. He spends weeks in recovery, learning to live with one hand, learning to live with one eye. The pain is constant. The wounds are slow to heal. But he's alive. Other patients in the hospital hear his story. Nurses and doctors who treat him can't believe what he did. A soldier with one hand killing 31 enemy soldiers? It sounds like propaganda, like an exaggerated war story. But the official reports confirm every detail. The bodies were counted. The witnesses gave statements. The evidence is undeniable. On August 9, 1945, just days before Japan surrenders, the Victoria Cross citation is approved and published in the London Gazette. It reads, Rifleman Lashiman Gurung was manning the most forward post of his platoon, which bore the brunt of an attack by at least 200 of the Japanese enemy. Twice he hurled back grenades which had fallen on his trench, but the third exploded in his right hand, blowing off his fingers, shattering his arm, and severely wounding him in the face, body, and right leg. His 2 comrades were also badly wounded. But the rifleman, now alone and disregarding his wounds, loaded and fired his rifle with his left hand for 4 hours, calmly waiting for each attack which he met with fire at point-blank range. Afterwards, when the wounded were counted, it is reported that there were 31 dead Japanese around his position which he had killed with only one arm. The Victoria Cross, the highest honor. Only 13 Gurkhas have ever received it in the entire history of the regiment. Lashiman Gurung is one of them. August 1945. The war ends. Japan surrenders after atomic bombs destroy Hiroshima and Nagasaki. World War II is over. Lashiman Gurung will never see combat again. His body won't allow it. Missing his right hand. Blind in his right eye. Shrapnel still embedded in his body. Scars covering his arm and chest. But he's alive. And he's carrying the Victoria Cross, the highest military decoration in the British Commonwealth. He returns to Nepal, to his village of Dekhani, to his family. They barely recognize him. The boy who left 5 years ago was whole. The man who returns is missing an eye and a hand. But he's a hero. The one-handed Gurkha who killed 31 Japanese soldiers. The story spreads through Nepal like wildfire. Children learn his name in school. People treat him with immense respect. He becomes a living symbol of Gurkha courage. Life after the war is difficult. Gurung can't farm effectively with one hand. The physical work required to grow crops, to plow fields, to harvest, it's nearly impossible with his injuries. The British government provides a small pension for Victoria Cross recipients. It isn't much. Gurung struggles financially for years. He marries, has children, tries to build a normal life. But normal is hard when you're famous, when everyone knows your story, when you carry the weight of that night in Burma with you every single day. The nightmares come. They always do for soldiers who've seen what Gurung saw, who've done what Gurung did. The sound of grenades, the screaming, the darkness, the blood. It doesn't go away just because the war is over. But Gurung doesn't complain, doesn't ask for sympathy. He did his duty. He held his position. His brothers in arms survived because he refused to let the Japanese pass. That's enough for him. Years pass, decades, the world moves on. New wars happen. New heroes emerge. But in Nepal, Gurung's name never fades. In 1995, 50 years after his action at Tongda, Gurung is invited to London for Victoria Cross commemorations. He travels to Britain, meets with other VC recipients, is honored by Queen Elizabeth II, attends ceremonies at the Imperial War Museum. People want to hear his story, want to understand how he did what he did. Gurung's answers are always simple. I was a Gurkha. I had my duty. I did what needed doing. That's all he ever says. No dramatic speeches. No claims of heroism. Just duty. The British government eventually increases pensions for Gurkha veterans. Gurung receives better support in his later years. He becomes an advocate for Gurkha welfare, speaks about the need to care for aging veterans, reminds people that soldiers from Nepal served Britain faithfully for generations and deserve respect and support. His voice carries weight. He's a living legend, a Victoria Cross holder, someone who proved courage beyond any doubt. Young Gurkhas who join the 8th Gurkha Rifles learn about Lashiman Gurung during training. His story is taught to every new recruit, the same way Gurung learned about heroes from earlier generations. The cycle continues. In his old age, Gurung lives quietly in Nepal. He doesn't seek attention, doesn't brag about his achievements. He's just an old soldier who did his job a long time ago. But whenever someone asks him about that night in May 1945, his one remaining eye gets distant. He remembers the darkness, the explosions, the pain, the rifle in his left hand, the Japanese soldiers rushing his trench, the 4 hours that felt like 4 years, and the 31 bodies at dawn. He remembers all of it, every second, every shot, every face. Better to die than be a coward, he says quietly. That's what we believed. That's what I did. And then he changes the subject, because for Lashiman Gurung that night was just duty. Nothing more, nothing less. December 12, 2010. Lashiman Gurung dies at his home in Nepal. He is 92 years old. He lived 65 years after that night in Burma. 65 years with one hand and one eye. 65 years carrying the memory of what he did. His death is mourned across Nepal and Britain. News organizations cover his passing. Military units honor his memory. The story of his one-man stand is told again in obituaries and remembrances. How one rifleman did what should have been impossible. How courage and duty overcame injury and odds. How a Gurkha showed the world what better to die than be a coward actually meant. His Victoria Cross medal is preserved for future generations. Museums display it. History books record it. But the real legacy isn't the medal. The real legacy is what his story represents. Lashiman Gurung was not superhuman. He wasn't 6 feet tall. He wasn't a giant. He was 4 foot 11 inches tall, shorter than most soldiers. He came from a poor farming family in Nepal. He had no special advantages, no elite training, no advanced weapons. What he had was duty, courage, the willingness to stand his ground when every instinct screamed at him to run, the refusal to quit when quitting would have been entirely justified. The Japanese soldiers who attacked his position that night were not cowards. They were experienced fighters. They had conquered most of Asia. They fought with fanatical determination. They outnumbered Gurung massively. They had every tactical advantage, except one. They didn't have a Gurkha in their way, and that one Gurkha refused to let them pass, refused to die, refused to fail his duty. The Japanese couldn't understand it, couldn't overcome it, couldn't break through. 200 soldiers stopped by one wounded man who simply would not quit. Modern soldiers study Gurung's action in military academies, trying to understand the psychology of it, trying to quantify the factors that allowed him to accomplish what he did. The truth is simpler than the analysis. Gurung was trained. He was brave. He was committed to his brothers in arms. When the moment came, he did what Gurkhas have always done. He fought. He didn't calculate odds or consider alternatives. He had a job, hold the trench. He held it. Everything else was irrelevant. The physical challenges alone should have stopped him. Operating a bolt-action rifle one-handed requires both hands. Loading requires both hands. Aiming accurately with one eye in pitch darkness is nearly impossible. Staying conscious with catastrophic injuries and blood loss defies medical expectations. Gurung did all of it, not because he was invulnerable, but because he accepted no alternative. The trench would hold because he was in it. The Japanese would not pass because he would not let them. Simple as that. There's a temptation to view actions like Gurung's as aberrations, impossible feats that normal soldiers couldn't replicate. But Gurung would reject that interpretation. He considered himself an ordinary Gurkha doing his duty. Nothing special, nothing superhuman, just a rifleman who refused to quit. His message to future generations is clear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's fighting despite fear. Duty isn't following orders when it's easy. It's doing your job when it's impossible. Honor isn't winning. It's refusing to lose. The trench where Lashiman Gurung made his stand no longer exists. The Burmese jungle has reclaimed that hillside. The battlefield is gone. The physical evidence eroded by time and weather. But the story remains, passed down through Gurkha regiments, taught to new soldiers, remembered by historians, celebrated by a grateful Britain and Nepal. 31 dead Japanese soldiers. 4 hours of hell. One hand, one eye, one Gurkha who simply would not die. On May 13, 1945, Lashiman Gurung proved that better to die than be a coward wasn't just words. It was reality. It was duty. It was who he was. The Japanese learned that lesson the hardest way possible. And the world learned what one man with one hand could accomplish when he simply refused to quit. The Victoria Cross. 2 words that carry more weight than almost any other military decoration in the world. Since it was created by Queen Victoria in 1856, only 1,358 Victoria Crosses have been awarded. In over 160 years. That's how rare it is. You don't get the Victoria Cross for bravery. Thousands of soldiers show bravery every day in combat. You get it for something beyond bravery. For actions that defy comprehension. For facing certain death and choosing to fight anyway. The official requirement is simple. Most conspicuous bravery or some daring or preeminent act of valor or self-sacrifice or extreme devotion to duty in the presence of the enemy. But those words don't capture what it really means, what it really takes. During World War II, only 182 Victoria Crosses were awarded. 182 out of millions of soldiers who served. Out of thousands of battles. Out of countless acts of courage. Only 182 were considered worthy of this medal. And of those 182, only 13 went to Gurkhas. 13 Gurkhas out of the 250,000 Gurkha soldiers who served in World War II. That's how exceptional you had to be. Lashiman Gurung is one of those 13. The medal itself is surprisingly simple. It's made from bronze. Actually, it's made from melted down cannons captured from the Russians during the Crimean War in the 1850s. The medal is dark, plain, unpolished. Just a cross with a crown and a lion on it. The words, "For Valor," inscribed below. It doesn't look impressive. It's not gold. It's not decorated with jewels. It's just dark bronze on a crimson ribbon. But soldiers would give anything for it, because it represents something that can't be bought or inherited or given. It has to be earned in blood, and the cost of earning it is usually death. Over 60% of Victoria Cross recipients in World War II received it posthumously, meaning they died performing the action that earned them the medal. They never got to wear it, never got to hold it, never got to go home. Lashiman Gurung is one of the lucky ones. He survived. He lived 65 more years after earning his Victoria Cross. He got to wear it, got to be honored by queens and prime ministers, got to tell his story. But surviving comes with its own burden, because you have to live with what you did, with what you saw, with the memories that never fade. Every Victoria Cross recipient carries ghosts, the faces of men they killed, the screams of wounded soldiers, the friends who died beside them, the moments when they should have died but didn't. Gurung carried those ghosts for 65 years. When people asked him how he did it, how he fought for 4 hours with one hand, how he killed 31 enemy soldiers, how he survived, he never gave dramatic answers. I was a Gurkha. I had my duty. That's all he ever said. Because for him, the Victoria Cross wasn't about glory. It wasn't about becoming famous. It wasn't about being a hero. It was just the recognition that he did his job. That when the moment came, when everything was on the line, when death was certain, he stood his ground. That's what the Victoria Cross means. Not superhuman ability, not special powers. Just ordinary men doing extraordinary things because duty demanded it. And on May 13, 1945, duty demanded everything from Lashiman Gurung. His hand, his eye, his blood. 4 hours of hell. He gave it all. And somehow, impossibly, he survived to tell the story. That's what makes him one of the 13. One of the chosen few. One of the immortals. Better to die than be a coward. In Nepali, it's Kafir Hunab Handa Marnu Ramro. Every Gurkha knows these words. Every Gurkha lives by them. But most people don't understand what they really mean. It's not just a motto. It's not just something you say to sound tough. It's a code that's been passed down through generations of Gurkha soldiers for over 200 years. The Gurkhas first fought for the British in 1815 during the Anglo-Nepalese War. The British were trying to conquer Nepal. The Gurkhas were defending their homeland. The war was brutal. The Gurkhas lost. But the British were so impressed by how the Gurkhas fought, how they never surrendered, how they preferred death to capture, how they fought with kukri knives when their ammunition ran out, that the British decided to recruit them. Since 1815, Gurkhas have served in every major British military campaign. India, Afghanistan, both world wars, the Falklands, Iraq, Afghanistan again. Over 200 years of continuous service. And in all that time, the reputation has never changed. Gurkhas don't quit. Gurkhas don't surrender. Gurkhas fight to the death. There's a famous story from World War I. British and German troops had an informal Christmas truce in 1914. They stopped fighting, sang carols, played football in no man's land. The Gurkhas didn't participate. They couldn't understand it. The enemy is the enemy. You don't make friends with them. You kill them. That's the mindset. Another story from World War II. A British officer was planning a mission and told his Gurkha troops they would have to jump from aircraft at 600 feet. The Gurkhas said that was too high. They'd all be killed on landing. The officer explained they'd be using parachutes. The Gurkhas said, "Oh, parachutes, why didn't you say so? We can jump from any height with parachutes." They were willing to jump without parachutes if ordered. That's the level of commitment. The kukri knife every Gurkha carries, it's not just a weapon. It's a symbol. The blade is curved, sharp on one edge, designed for one purpose, killing. When a Gurkha draws his kukri in combat, tradition says it must taste blood before being sheathed, even if that means cutting his own hand. That tradition is mostly symbolic now, but it represents the seriousness with which Gurkhas approach combat. During the Burma campaign, Japanese intelligence distributed pamphlets warning their troops about Gurkhas. The pamphlet said, "The Gurkhas are small in stature but extremely dangerous. They are experts with the knife. They move silently through jungle. They show no mercy. If you encounter Gurkhas, extreme caution is advised." The Japanese had conquered most of Asia by 1942. They had terrified Chinese, British, Dutch, and American forces. But they feared the Gurkhas. And on May 13, 1945, They learned why. When that grenade exploded in Lashiman Gurung's hand, when his fingers were blown off, when his eye was destroyed, when blood poured from his face, he had a choice. Surrender, fall back, accept death. Any of those would have been understandable, justified, rational. But the Gurkha code doesn't care about rational, cares about duty. Better to die than be a coward. Gurung grabbed his rifle with his left hand because the alternative, letting the Japanese pass, letting his brothers die, abandoning his post, that was unthinkable. Not because he was superhuman, because he was a Gurkha. And for 200 years, Gurkhas have proven that some things matter more than survival. Some things matter more than pain. Some things matter more than fear. Duty matters more. Honor matters more. Your brothers in arms matter more. That's the code. That's what those words mean. And on one night in Burma, one 4'11" soldier proved it wasn't just philosophy. It was reality. The Japanese soldiers who attacked Lashiman Gurung's position that night, they weren't cowards either. They weren't poorly trained. They weren't weak. These were veterans of the Imperial Japanese Army. Men who had conquered Singapore, Malaya, the Philippines, Burma. Men who had been taught from childhood that death in battle was the highest honor. That surrender was the ultimate disgrace. The Japanese military code, Bushido, was in some ways similar to the Gurkha code. Both emphasized duty above all. Both valued honor over life. Both taught that death was preferable to failure. When those 200 Japanese soldiers moved toward Gurung's trench that night, they expected to die. Many of them knew they wouldn't survive the war. Japan was losing. The Allies were closing in. Supplies were running out. Reinforcements weren't coming. But they still fought, because duty demanded it. The difference that night wasn't courage. Both sides had courage. The Japanese showed incredible bravery charging into gunfire, throwing grenades, accepting casualties to try to break through. The difference was circumstance and luck. Gurung was in a defensive position. The Japanese had to attack across open ground. Gurung had a rifle. The Japanese had to get close to use their weapons effectively. Gurung had training. The Japanese had training too, but they were exhausted from months of retreat and fighting. And Gurung had one other advantage. He was fighting for his brothers. The men behind him in those trenches 100 yards back. If he failed, they died. That knowledge gave him strength that went beyond physical ability. The Japanese soldiers who died that night, 31 confirmed, probably more wounded who died later, they had families too. Mothers, fathers, wives, children. They had homes in Japan they'd never see again. They were following orders, doing their duty, fighting for what they believed was their country's survival. War doesn't care about who's right or wrong. It just cares about who's stronger, luckier, better positioned. That night, Lashiman Gurung was all three. After the battle, when Gurkha soldiers examined the Japanese bodies, they found letters, photographs, personal items. One soldier carried a picture of his daughter. Another had a letter from his wife. A third had a small Buddhist prayer scroll. These weren't monsters. They were men. Men who fought hard. Men who died far from home. In later years, when historians studied the Battle of Tongda, some Japanese veterans were interviewed. The survivors who retreated that night remembered the forward trench. Remembered the rifle fire that wouldn't stop. Remembered the voice screaming in a language they didn't understand. They didn't know until years later that it was one man. One wounded man. Fighting with one hand. When they found out, their reaction wasn't anger or shame. It was respect. Because soldiers recognize courage in other soldiers. Even enemy soldiers. One Japanese veteran interviewed in the 1980s said, "We thought there were at least 10 men in that position. Maybe more. The fire was so accurate, so continuous. When we learned it was one man with one hand, we couldn't believe it. But if it's true, then he was a true warrior. The kind we were taught to respect." That's the strange reality of war. Men kill each other, hate each other, try to destroy each other. But there's also respect for those who fight well, who do their duty, who refuse to quit. Lashiman Gurung killed 31 Japanese soldiers that night. Those men died far from home, in a war they couldn't win, following orders they couldn't refuse. They deserve to be remembered too. Not as villains, not as faceless enemies, but as soldiers who fought with courage even if they fought on the wrong side. War creates heroes, but it also creates ghosts. The 31 Japanese soldiers who fell in front of Gurung's trench became ghosts that night, and Lashiman Gurung carried those ghosts with him for 65 years. Every face, every shot, every death, that's the burden of survival. That's the cost of the Victoria Cross. That's the price of duty. You survive, but you never forget. The Lee Enfield rifle, British military standard since 1895, used in both world wars. Over 17 million produced. Reliable, accurate, trusted by soldiers across the British Empire. But it was designed for two hands. Always two hands. The manual is explicit about this. Right hand grips the small of the stock, finger on trigger. Left hand supports the fore-end, steadies the barrel. When you fire, the recoil pushes back into your shoulder. You absorb it with your whole body. Then you have to work the bolt. This is the critical part. This is what makes the Lee Enfield a bolt-action rifle. You reach your right hand up to the bolt handle. Pull it up 90 degrees. Pull it back. This ejects the spent cartridge. Push it forward. This chambers a new round. Push it down. This locks the bolt. Now you can fire again. The whole process takes about 2 seconds for a trained soldier using both hands. British Army training required soldiers to fire 15 aimed shots per minute. That's one shot every 4 seconds, including bolt operation. Now remove the right hand. The hand that operates the bolt. The hand that grips the trigger. The hand that steadies the weapon. Remove it completely. Not injured, gone. Blown off by a grenade. How do you operate the rifle now? You don't. That's what every military manual says. That's what every training instructor would tell you. Without your right hand, the rifle is useless. Find another weapon. Fall back. Get medical help. Lashiman Gurung didn't have another weapon. Couldn't fall back. Medical help was 100 yards away through enemy fire. So he improvised something that had never been taught. Never been practiced. Never been tested. He braced the rifle against his left hip. Held it tight against his body to absorb recoil. Wrapped his left hand around the bolt handle. Worked it with his left hand while keeping the weapon steady with his body. Back, forward, down, fire. This should be impossible. The angle is wrong. The leverage is wrong. The strength required is too much for one hand. And you can't aim properly because your left hand is busy working the bolt. But Gurung made it work, because the alternative was death. His death. His brother's deaths. Pain makes it harder. Blood loss makes you weak. Shock makes your hands shake. Darkness means you can't see what you're doing. You're working the bolt by feel. And you have to do this while enemy soldiers are shooting at you. While grenades are exploding around you. While you're bleeding from dozens of wounds. Military researchers later tried to replicate what Gurung did. They gave able-bodied soldiers Lee Enfield rifles and told them to operate the bolt one-handed. Left hand only. Most couldn't do it at all. Those who managed it took 10 to 15 seconds per shot. Far too slow for combat. And they were healthy, uninjured, not under fire. Gurung did it for 4 hours. In darkness. With one eye. While wounded. While 200 enemy soldiers tried to kill him. He fired at least 60 rounds that night. Probably more. That's 60 times he worked that bolt with his left hand. 60 times he chambered a new round. 60 times he aimed and fired accurately enough to hit targets in near total darkness. The Lee Enfield rifle weighs 9 pounds when loaded. Hold 9 pounds in one hand for 4 hours while repeatedly working a bolt mechanism that requires significant force. Your arm should give out after 30 minutes. Gurung's arm didn't give out, because giving out meant dying. Meant his brothers dying. The thought was unacceptable. So his body did what his mind demanded. It kept working. Kept fighting. Kept killing. The human body has limits. Pain tolerance has limits. Endurance has limits. Strength has limits. But willpower? Willpower has no limits. That's what Lashiman Gurung proved. That when duty demands the impossible, when survival requires the unthinkable, the human will can override every physical limitation. The rifle shouldn't work one-handed. The soldier should collapse from blood loss. The defense should fail. But none of that matters when a Gurkha decides. This line will not break. This position will hold. These enemies will not pass. Physics says it's impossible. Medical science says it's impossible. Military doctrine says it's impossible. Lashiman Gurung proved them all wrong. Lashiman Gurung fought alone for 4 hours. That's what the records say. That's what the Victoria Cross citation says. That's what history remembers. But that's not entirely true. There were 3 Gurkhas in that forward trench when the battle started. 3 men assigned to the most dangerous position in the entire perimeter. Gurung was one of them. The other 2? History doesn't record their names. We know they were there. We know they were wounded by the same grenade blast that destroyed Gurung's hand. The Victoria Cross citation mentions them. His 2 comrades were also badly wounded. But that's all it says. No names. No details. No recognition. What happened to them? Did they survive the battle? Did they receive medical treatment? Did they make it home to Nepal? Did they live long lives? Did they die that night? The records don't say. They vanish from history after that one sentence. This is the reality of war. For every hero whose name is remembered, there are dozens whose names are forgotten. For every medal awarded, there are hundreds of acts of courage that go unrecorded. Those 2 Gurkhas were in the same trench, faced the same attack, were wounded by the same explosion. They had families too. They had villages in Nepal waiting for them. They had stories worth telling. But history only remembers one name, Lashiman Gurung. Why? Because Gurung kept fighting. Because what he did after being wounded was so extraordinary that it overshadowed everything else. Because his action was so far beyond normal courage that it demanded recognition. But those other 2 Gurkhas, they were brave too. They volunteered for that forward position knowing it was a death sentence. They stood their ground when the Japanese attacked. They threw grenades back at the enemy. They fought until they physically couldn't fight anymore. They deserve to be remembered. We don't know their names, but we can honor what they did. They were part of the story. They were there. This is true for every battle, for every famous action. There are always others involved. Support troops, medics, supply personnel. The men who held the line while the hero fought. The men who provided covering fire. The men who risked their lives to evacuate the wounded. After the battle, when Naik Deba Singh Bura and other Gurkhas rushed forward to Gurung's trench, they didn't just pull Gurung out. They pulled out the other 2 wounded Gurkhas as well. Those men were bleeding, in pain, possibly dying. The medics worked on all 3. The evacuation carried all 3 to the rear. The field hospital treated all 3. But only one name appears in the history books. This doesn't diminish Gurung's achievement. What he did was genuinely extraordinary. He earned the Victoria Cross. He deserved every honor he received. But it's important to remember, he wasn't the only Gurkha in that trench. He wasn't the only man who stood his ground. He wasn't the only soldier who bled that night. He was just the one who kept fighting when others couldn't. The one whose action was so far beyond the call of duty that it couldn't be ignored. In later years, when Gurung was asked about that night, he sometimes mentioned the other 2. Not by name. Maybe he didn't remember their names, or maybe the trauma of the battle had erased those details. But he acknowledged them. He said, "We were 3. Then I was alone." That's all. But it's enough to remind us, there were 3 Gurkhas in that trench. 3 men who faced 200 enemies. 3 men who were willing to die for their duty. 1 became a legend. 2 became footnotes. War is like that. Unfair. Arbitrary. Some survive to tell their stories. Others die unremembered. Some receive medals. Others receive only graves. But they all deserve honor. They all deserve respect. They all did their duty. So when you hear the story of Lashiman Gurung and his impossible stand, remember, there were 2 other Gurkhas in that trench. We don't know their names. We don't know their stories. But they were there. They fought. They bled. They're part of the story too. And they should not be forgotten. 4 hours. From 1:20 a.m. to dawn. 240 minutes. 14,400 seconds. That's how long Lashiman Gurung fought in that trench. 4 hours of continuous combat. Statistically, most intense firefights last 3 to 5 minutes. Anything longer and soldiers run out of ammunition, take casualties, or break contact. 4 hours is an eternity in combat. Let's break down what those 4 hours really mean. What Gurung experienced. What kept him going when his body was screaming at him to stop. The first hour, 1:20 a.m. to 2:20 a.m. This is when the grenade destroys his hand. When the pain hits. When the shock of the injury sets in. His brain is flooded with adrenaline. His heart is racing. He can't think clearly. Can't process what just happened. But the Japanese are attacking. No time to think. No time to feel. Just grab the rifle. Start shooting. Work the bolt. Shoot again. The pain is overwhelming. His hand, or what's left of it, is on fire. Nerve endings screaming. Blood pouring down his arm. But adrenaline is a powerful drug. It blocks some of the pain. Not all, but enough. This first hour is pure survival instinct. No conscious thought. Just reaction. Fire. Bolt. Fire. Bolt. The Japanese keep coming. He keeps shooting. The second hour, 2:20 a.m. to 3:20 a.m. This is when it gets harder. The adrenaline starts to wear off. The pain increases. Blood loss makes him dizzy. His vision blurs, not just because his right eye is destroyed, but because his brain isn't getting enough oxygen. His left arm is cramping. Holding a 9-pound rifle for an hour. Working the bolt repeatedly. The muscles are burning. Shaking. But he can't stop. The Japanese are still attacking. Still throwing grenades. Still firing. This is when most soldiers would pass out. Blood loss alone should make him unconscious. The pain should shut down his nervous system. His body should force him to stop. But his mind won't let him. Because 100 yards behind him, his brothers are depending on him. If he stops, they die. The thought keeps him conscious. Keeps him fighting. The third hour, 3:20 a.m. to 4:20 a.m. This is the darkest hour. Literally and mentally. The jungle is pitch black. He can barely see. His one remaining eye is filled with blood and sweat. His depth perception is gone. He's judging distance by sound now. Muzzle flashes. Footsteps. Screams. His ammunition is running low. He's been rationing for the last 30 minutes. Every shot has to count. Can't waste rounds. But the Japanese keep probing. Testing his position. Looking for weakness. This hour is when time loses meaning. Seconds feel like minutes. Minutes feel like hours. He's no longer thinking about survival. He's no longer thinking about going home. He's thinking about the next shot. The next target. The next second. That's all. 1 second at a time. That's how you survive 4 hours of hell. You don't think about 4 hours. You think about the next second. Then the next. Then the next. The fourth hour, 4:20 a.m. to dawn. This is when his body starts to shut down. Blood loss has reached critical levels. His brain is starved of oxygen. His vision is narrowing to a tunnel. His hearing is fading. His left arm is barely functioning. But dawn is coming. He can feel it. The darkness is getting lighter. Just a little. Just enough. The Japanese know it too. They try one last assault. One final push to break through before daylight. Before Allied aircraft can spot them. Gurung fires his last rounds. When the rifle is empty, he reaches for his kukri knife. If they reach his trench, he'll fight with steel. He'll fight with his bare hand. He'll fight with his teeth if necessary. But they don't reach the trench. The assault breaks. The Japanese retreat. Dawn arrives. 4 hours. The longest 4 hours of Gurung's life. 4 hours that feel like 4 years. 4 hours that he'll relive every night for the next 65 years. When the sun rises and his brothers reach his trench, Gurung is still conscious. Barely. Still holding his rifle. Still watching the jungle. Still ready to fight. Because that's what duty requires. You fight until you win. Or until you die. Lashiman Gurung didn't die. But a part of him stayed in that trench forever. The part that was whole. The part that didn't know pain. The part that didn't carry ghosts. That part died on May 13, 1945. And it never came back. When the medics reach Lashiman Gurung at dawn on May 13, 1945, they expect to find a corpse. What they find instead defies every medical rule they know. He's lost approximately 40% of his blood volume. At 30% blood loss, most patients go into hypovolemic shock. At 40%, the heart can't pump effectively. Blood pressure drops. Organs start to fail. Death is imminent. Gurung is conscious, talking, still gripping his rifle. His right hand is gone, traumatic amputation from the grenade blast. The wound is catastrophic. Bone fragments, torn tissue, exposed nerves. The bleeding should have killed him in 20 minutes, but the heat from the explosion cauterized many of the blood vessels, sealed them shut. A horrific injury that accidentally saved his life. His right eye is destroyed, the eyeball ruptured by shrapnel, fluids leaking, the socket filled with blood. This injury alone should cause enough pain to render someone unconscious. Gurung stayed conscious for 4 hours after receiving it. Shrapnel wounds cover his body, face, chest, arms, legs. The medics count 47 separate entry wounds. Some are superficial. Others are deep, penetrating muscle and tissue. Several pieces of shrapnel are lodged near vital organs. Burns cover his right arm and chest. 3rd degree in some areas. The skin is charred, blackened. These burns will become infected within 24 hours if not treated. In the jungle environment, heat, humidity, insects, infection is almost guaranteed. The field medics stabilize him as best they can. Apply pressure bandages to stop the bleeding. Inject morphine for the pain. Start an intravenous line to replace lost fluids. They transport him to a field hospital 5 miles behind the lines. The journey takes 2 hours on rough jungle roads. Every bump, every jolt sends waves of pain through his body. He stays conscious the entire time. At the field hospital, surgeons examine him. They're astonished he's alive. More astonished he's conscious. One surgeon later writes in his report, "Patient presented with injuries incompatible with consciousness. Expected imminent death. Patient remained alert and responsive throughout examination." The surgeons work for 6 hours. They remove accessible shrapnel, 34 pieces total. 13 pieces are too deep or too close to vital organs to remove safely. They'll stay in his body permanently. They amputate what remains of his right hand. There's nothing to save. The bones are shattered. The nerves are destroyed. The tissue is dead. They cut just below the wrist, shape the stump, close the wound. The right eye cannot be saved. They remove what's left of the eyeball, clean the socket, pack it with gauze to prevent infection. They treat the burns with sulfa drugs, the best antibiotics available in 1945. They clean and debride the wounds. Stitch the deeper lacerations. Throughout all of this, Gurung remains conscious. He refuses to let them put him under general anesthesia. He wants to stay awake, wants to know what's happening. The morphine dulls the pain but doesn't eliminate it. Why did he survive? The doctors debate this question for days. They've seen thousands of wounded soldiers. They've seen men die from injuries far less severe than Gurung's. The medical answer, a combination of factors. The cauterization from the blast. His physical conditioning, he's a soldier in peak health. The adrenaline that kept his heart pumping. The immediate medical attention once the battle ended. But there's another answer. One that can't be measured in blood pressure or heart rate. One that doesn't appear in medical textbooks. Willpower. Gurung's mind refused to let his body die. When his blood pressure dropped, his will kept his heart beating. When shock should have shut down his nervous system, his determination kept him conscious. When pain should have made him collapse, his duty kept him standing. Medical science says this shouldn't be possible. That the mind can't override the body's physical limitations to this degree. But the doctors treating Gurung saw it happen. They documented it. They wrote about it in medical journals after the war. One surgeon's report concludes, "This soldier's survival cannot be fully explained by medical science. His injuries were fatal. His blood loss was fatal. His shock was fatal. Yet he survived and remained combat effective for 4 hours. The only explanation is extraordinary willpower and determination to fulfill his duty." Years later, military researchers study Gurung's case. They want to understand how soldiers can perform under extreme trauma, how the mind can push the body beyond its limits. They interview Gurung, ask him how he stayed conscious, how he kept fighting, how he survived. His answer is the same as always: "I was a Gurkha. I had my duty. That's all." The researchers write detailed reports, create psychological profiles, develop training programs based on his example. But they never fully answer the question, how did he survive? Some things, it seems, can't be explained, can't be replicated, can't be taught. Some things are just impossible until someone does them. Lashiman Gurung survives his wounds. He receives the Victoria Cross. He goes home to Nepal. The war ends. He lives. But survival isn't the same as healing. His right hand is gone. In its place is a stump that ends just below the wrist. For the rest of his life, every simple task becomes a challenge. Buttoning a shirt, tying shoes, eating, writing. Everything requires learning new methods, adapting, compensating. He learns to use his left hand for tasks he used to do with his right. It takes months, years. Some things he never fully masters. Some things he needs help with for the rest of his life. His right eye is gone. Depth perception is gone with it. Judging distances becomes difficult. Reaching for objects, pouring water, walking down steps. His brain has to relearn how to navigate the world with only one eye. He develops chronic headaches. The damaged socket aches constantly. Changes in weather make it worse. Cold days, rainy days. The pain never fully goes away. The shrapnel still embedded in his body, 13 pieces that couldn't be removed. They cause problems for decades. Some pieces migrate slowly through his tissue, create infections, cause pain. One piece lodged near his spine causes nerve damage. His left leg goes numb periodically, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. The burns on his arm and chest scar badly. The tissue is tight and flexible, limits his range of motion, makes certain movements painful. The scars are sensitive to sunlight, to heat, to touch. But the physical scars are just the beginning. The mental scars run deeper. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, isn't widely recognized in 1945. Soldiers call it shell shock or combat fatigue. The military doesn't understand it, doesn't treat it, expects soldiers to just get over it. Gurung doesn't get over it. Nobody does. The nightmares start in the hospital. They never stop. He dreams about the trench, the grenades, the explosions, the darkness, the screaming, the blood. He dreams about the Japanese soldiers he killed, sees their faces, hears their voices, watches them fall over and over. Some nights he wakes up believing he's still in that trench, still fighting, still bleeding. His wife learns to wake him gently, speak softly, give him time to remember where he is. Loud noises trigger panic. Fireworks, car backfires, doors slamming. His heart races. His breathing becomes rapid. He's back in Burma, back in the jungle, back in the darkness. Crowds make him anxious. Too many people, too much noise, too many potential threats. He prefers quiet places, open spaces where he can see the exits. He doesn't talk about the war, not to his family, not to friends, not to other veterans. When people ask, he gives brief answers and changes the subject. This is common among combat veterans. The things they saw, the things they did, they can't explain it to people who weren't there. The words don't exist. The experiences are too far outside normal human experience, so they carry it alone. The memories, the guilt, the questions that have no answers. Why did I survive when so many others died? Why was I in that trench instead of someone else? Did I do enough? Could I have saved more people? These questions haunt Gurung for 65 years. There are no good answers, just the weight of survival. He isolates himself sometimes, withdraws from family and friends, sits alone for hours, staring at nothing, lost in memories. His children learn to recognize these moods. Give him space. Wait for him to come back. Alcohol helps some veterans cope. Gurung doesn't drink much. His Gurkha training emphasized discipline and self-control. But he understands why some veterans do. Why they need something to dull the memories, to quiet the voices, to stop the dreams. The physical disabilities limit his work options. He can't farm effectively, can't do manual labor. The pension from the British government helps, but it's not much. He struggles financially for years. Some days are harder than others. Some days the pain is manageable. The memories are distant. He can function almost normally. Other days the stump throbs. The missing eye aches. The shrapnel moves. The scars pull tight. The nightmares were particularly vivid the night before. Everything hurts. Everything reminds him. On those days he wonders if surviving was worth it. The cost is too high. If death in that trench might have been easier than 65 years of living with the aftermath. But he has a wife, children, grandchildren, a family that needs him, a community that respects him, young Gurkhas who look up to him, a story that inspires people. So he keeps going, day by day, year by year, carrying his scars, carrying his memories, carrying the weight of that night in May 1945. This is the reality of being a war hero. The medals, the honors, the recognition, they're real, they matter. But so do the nightmares, the pain, the scars that never heal, the price you pay for doing your duty. Lashiman Gurung paid that price, every day, for 65 years. And he never complained, Never asked for sympathy. Never called himself a hero. He was just a Gurkha who did his job and lived with the consequences. Let's talk numbers. Cold hard statistics. Because numbers don't lie. Numbers don't exaggerate. Numbers tell the truth. May 13, 1945. 1 forward trench. 3 Gurkha riflemen assigned. 2 wounded and incapacitated within the first minute. 1 remains combat effective. Attacking force, at least 200 Japanese soldiers. Conservative estimate based on witness reports and tactical assessment. Some estimates go as high as 250. The odds, 200 to 1. Or possibly 250 to 1. Duration of engagement, 4 hours. 240 minutes. 14,400 seconds of continuous combat. Confirmed enemy casualties, 31 dead Japanese soldiers. Bodies counted at dawn by multiple witnesses. Documented in official reports. Additional casualties. Blood trails indicate at least 20 more wounded enemy soldiers were dragged away. Conservative estimate, possibly more. Total enemy casualties caused by 1 man, minimum 51. Possibly as high as 70 to 80. Ammunition expended, approximately 60 to 80 rounds. Based on ammunition load and post-battle inventory. Hit rate, at least 50%. In pitch darkness. With 1 hand. With 1 eye. While wounded. Under fire. For comparison, the average hit rate for trained soldiers in combat conditions is 10 to 15%. Gurung's hit rate was 3 to 4 times higher than normal combat standards. Distance to targets, estimated 20 to 50 yards. Close range. But in darkness with limited visibility, these might as well be long-range shots. Number of grenades thrown back before injury, 2. Both successfully returned to enemy before detonating. Number of grenades that hit his trench during the 4-hour battle. Estimated 30 to 40 based on witness accounts and explosive residue. Survival rate from traumatic hand amputation in combat, approximately 40% in 1945. Lower in jungle environments due to infection risk. Survival rate from 40% blood loss, less than 10% without immediate transfusion. Gurung received no transfusion for hours. Time to unconsciousness from blood loss of this magnitude, typically 15 to 30 minutes. Gurung remained conscious for over 4 hours. Physical impossibilities Gurung performed. Operating a bolt-action rifle one-handed requires 2 to 3 times normal strength. Repeated 60 to 80 times over 4 hours. Maintaining aim with 1 eye in darkness requires visual adaptation that typically takes 20 to 30 minutes. Gurung did it immediately after eye injury. Remaining conscious with catastrophic blood loss contradicts medical understanding of hypovolemic shock. Maintaining fine motor control while in shock. Medical science says this is impossible. Gurung did it for 4 hours. Suppressing pain response. Pain from his injuries should trigger immediate shock. Gurung continued combat operations. Psychological factors. Mental toughness score, unmeasurable. No psychological assessment tool existed in 1945 that could quantify what Gurung demonstrated. Stress hormone levels, unknown but presumably off the charts. Adrenaline, cortisol, and other stress hormones at levels that would kill most people. Decision-making under extreme stress. Made correct tactical decisions every few seconds for 4 hours. Each wrong decision would have been fatal. Awards and recognition. Victoria Cross. 1 awarded to Gurung out of 182 total VC awards in World War II. Percentage of Gurkhas who received VC in WW2, 13 out of 250,000. That's 0.0052%. Gurung is in the top 0.0052% of Gurkha soldiers. And Gurkhas are already in the top 1% of soldiers worldwide. Long-term impact. Years lived after the battle, 65. From age 27 to 92. Number of people who heard his story during his lifetime. Estimated hundreds of thousands through commemorations, interviews, and military education. Number of people who learned his story after his death. Millions. His story is taught in military academies worldwide. Value to military training, incalculable. His action is studied to understand human performance under extreme stress. Number of similar one-man stands in military history. Fewer than 20 documented cases at this level of impossibility. Here's the most important number, 31. 31 enemy soldiers killed by one wounded man in one night. Not 3, not 13, 31. Some historians have questioned this number, suggested it might be exaggerated. War stories often are. But multiple witnesses confirmed it. The bodies were physically counted at dawn. British officers documented it. Japanese records from the unit that attacked acknowledged massive casualties at that position. The number is real. The number is verified. The number is undeniable. 31 dead enemy soldiers, caused by one man who should have died in the first minute of combat, who fought for 4 hours with one hand, who held a position against 200 attackers. The numbers don't lie. They just tell a story that shouldn't be possible. But Rifleman Gurkha made it possible. One shot at a time. One enemy at a time. 1 second at a time. For 4 hours. The math is simple. The execution was impossible. The result was legendary. May 1945. The world is watching Europe. Hitler is dead. Germany has surrendered. The war in Europe is over. Newspapers and radios broadcast the celebrations. Victory in Europe Day v Day. But in Burma the war is still raging. And nobody's paying attention. The Burma campaign is called the Forgotten War. Forgotten by the press. Forgotten by politicians. Forgotten by everyone except the men fighting and dying there. But this forgotten war matters. It matters strategically. It matters tactically. And on May 13, 1945, one trench in one small village becomes the hinge point for everything. Here's why Gurkha's stand mattered beyond just personal heroism. The Japanese force trying to break through, 200 soldiers, they're not just a random patrol. They're the advance element of a much larger force. Behind them are at least 2,000 more Japanese troops trying to escape Allied encirclement. If those 200 soldiers break through at Tongda, they open a corridor. The 2,000 behind them pour through. They hit the British supply lines, cut off reinforcements, potentially surround and destroy multiple Allied units. The strategic situation in Burma in May 1945. The Allies have the Japanese beaten but not destroyed. The Japanese are trying to conduct an organized retreat. Fall back to prepared positions. Regroup. Maybe hold Burma long enough for a negotiated peace. The Allied objective, don't let them retreat in order. Hit them during withdrawal. Destroy them piecemeal. End the Burma campaign quickly so troops and resources can be redirected to the planned invasion of Japan. Every Japanese unit that escapes means more fighting later. More Allied casualties. More months of war. C Company's position at Tongda blocks one of 3 Japanese withdrawal routes. If the Japanese break through here, 1/3 of their forces escape. The Allied plan fails. The entire company, over 100 Gurkhas, is positioned to stop this retreat. But the defensive line has one weak point, the forward trench. The one Gurkha occupies. If that trench falls, the Japanese flank the entire position. C Company gets rolled up. 100 men die or are captured. The withdrawal route opens. 2,000 Japanese soldiers escape. Everything hinges on 3 Gurkhas in one trench. And within minutes, everything hinges on one Gurkha with one hand. Gurkha doesn't know this. He's not thinking about strategic implications. He's thinking about the next shot, the next target, staying alive, protecting his brothers in the trenches behind him. But the effect of his stand ripples outward. The Japanese assault fails. The 200 soldiers retreat. The 2,000 behind them can't advance. They're forced to find another route. That takes time. Gives the Allies time to reposition, to set up more blocking positions. Within a week, the entire Japanese force attempting to withdraw through this sector is trapped, destroyed. Over 1,500 Japanese soldiers killed or captured. Because they couldn't break through at Tongda. Because one trench held. Because one Gurkha refused to let them pass. Military historians later analyzed the Burma campaign. They identified Tongda as a critical point. One of several small battles that collectively broke the Japanese ability to conduct organized resistance. None of this makes headlines. No newspapers report it. It's just one small engagement in a forgotten theater of a war that's already ending. But to the Gurkhas and C Company, it's everything. To the Allied units that would have been cut off, it's survival. To the strategic planners mapping the Burma campaign, it's success. One man, one trench, 4 hours. Strategic consequences that ripple for weeks. This is how wars are won. not just through grand strategies and massive battles, but through individual actions. Soldiers doing their jobs, holding impossible positions, refusing to fail. Gurung never thought about strategic importance, never considered the bigger picture. He just knew this trench must hold. His brothers must survive. His duty must be done. Everything else? That's for the historians to figure out later. But here's the truth. If Gurung falls in the first minute like he should have, the Japanese break through. C Company is destroyed. 2,000 enemy soldiers escape. The Burma campaign takes weeks longer. More Allied soldiers die. One trench, one man, one impossible stand. Changed the course of the entire campaign. That's not hyperbole. That's documented military history. British and Japanese records both confirm it. The battle at Tongda was a turning point. And the turning point was one wounded Gurkha who simply refused to quit. Wars are won by soldiers. Individual soldiers. Making individual choices. In individual moments. When everything is on the line. When failure means death. Rifleman Gurung made his choice. Held his trench. Changed history. And nobody except military historians even knows it happened. On the edge of Rifleman Gurung's trench, within arm's reach, sits his kukri knife. He placed it there before the battle started, just in case. The kukri, the signature weapon of every Gurkha soldier. 16 to 18 inches long, curved blade, sharp on one edge, weighted for chopping and slashing. This isn't just a knife. This is the symbol of 200 years of Gurkha military tradition. Every Gurkha receives his kukri when he joins the regiment. He keeps it for life. It's blessed by priests, treated with respect, never drawn without reason. There's a saying, when a Gurkha draws his kukri, it must taste blood before being sheathed. The tradition says if you draw the blade, you must use it, even if that means cutting your own thumb to honor the weapon. This tradition is mostly ceremonial now, but it represents the seriousness with which Gurkhas approach combat. The kukri isn't a tool. It's a weapon of last resort. When you draw it, someone is about to die. Gurung placed his kukri on the trench edge knowing what it meant. If the Japanese got close enough, if his rifle failed, if his ammunition ran out, he would use the knife. With one hand, half blind, bleeding, against multiple enemies. The kukri is designed for one-handed use. The weight and curve make it effective for slashing and chopping without requiring great strength. The blade is heavy enough that gravity does most of the work. You don't stab with a kukri. You swing it. And what happens when you swing a kukri at a human target? Ask the Japanese soldiers who faced Gurkhas in close combat. Ask the Germans in World War I. Ask anyone who fought against Gurkhas and survived. The kukri can decapitate a man with one swing, can sever limbs, can disembowel. It's designed for maximum damage with minimum effort. In the hands of a trained Gurkha, it's absolutely lethal. During World War II, Japanese intelligence warned their troops specifically about Gurkha kukris. The warning said, if you encounter Gurkhas in close combat, retreat immediately. They are experts with the curved knife. They will kill you before you can react. This warning came from an army that practiced sword combat, that trained soldiers in Bushido traditions, that emphasized close quarters fighting. Even they feared the Gurkha kukri. Throughout the 4-hour battle, Gurung keeps that knife within reach. Every time he reloads, he can see it. Every time he shifts position, it's right there. Ready. Waiting. There are moments when Japanese soldiers get close. Very close. Close enough that Gurung could reach out and touch them. Close enough that the rifle is almost useless. In those moments, Gurung's hand moves toward the kukri. Ready to grab it. Ready to use it. But each time he manages to work the rifle bolt one more time. Fire one more shot. Drop the enemy before they reach the trench. But he knows, if they get any closer, if one more soldier makes it through his rifle fire, he's using the knife. And if he uses the knife, he'll kill with it. One-handed or not. Wounded or not. That's what the kukri is for. That's what Gurkhas do. Near dawn, during the final Japanese assault, Gurung's rifle runs empty. He's out of ammunition. The Japanese are charging. This is it. This is the moment. He reaches for the kukri, grabs it with his left hand. The blade feels heavy, solid, deadly. He's ready. If they reach his trench, he'll kill as many as he can before they kill him. Better to die than be a coward. And if he dies, it'll be with that kukri in his hand. taking enemies with him. But the Japanese assault breaks just before they reach the trench. They fall back, retreat into the jungle. The moment passes. Gurung places the kukri back on the trench edge. And used, but ready, always ready. After the battle, when Naik, Bura, and other Gurkhas reach Gurung's trench, they see the kukri. Still there. Still clean. Still sharp. They know what it means. Gurung was prepared to fight with the knife if necessary. Was prepared to die with it in his hand. That's the Gurkha way. In later years, when people ask Gurung about that night, they always ask about the rifle. The one-handed shooting. The impossible accuracy. They rarely ask about the kukri. But Gurung knows. The knife was the backup plan. The last resort. The final weapon when everything else failed. He never had to use it. But he would have. Without hesitation. Without fear. Just duty. The kukri sits on the edge of the trench all night. Silent. Waiting. A symbol of what Gurkhas are willing to do when pushed to the limit. Draw the blade. Taste blood. Die fighting. Better to die than be a coward. 5:47 a.m. May 13, 1945. The sun rises over the Burmese jungle. Light filters through the trees. The darkness that covered the battlefield for 4 hours slowly fades. Lashiman Gurung sits in his trench. Still conscious. Still holding his rifle. Still watching the jungle. Still ready to fight if the Japanese come back. His right hand is gone. His right eye is destroyed. Blood has soaked through every piece of his uniform. His left arm shakes from exhaustion. 4 hours of holding a 9-pound rifle, working the bolt, firing repeatedly. But he's alive. Impossibly, incredibly, unbelievably alive. Behind him, 100 yards back, the rest of C Company has survived too. Not a single Gurkha in the main defensive line was killed or seriously wounded. Because the forward trench held. Because the Japanese never broke through. Section Commander Naik Debasing Bura watches the sun rise. He's been watching Gurung's position all night. Listening to the rifle fire. Counting the shots. Amazed that it never stopped. Now, with daylight, it's finally safe to move forward. The Japanese have withdrawn. The battlefield is quiet except for the sounds of wounded men and dying men calling out in the jungle. Bura and several other Gurkhas rush forward to Gurung's trench. They expect, truly expect, to find him dead. The amount of fire that position took. The grenades. The explosions. No one survives that. But Gurung is sitting there. Rifle across his lap. Kukri knife within reach. One eye open. Watching them approach. Recognizing them. He tries to speak. His voice is hoarse from screaming challenges at the Japanese all night. His throat is dry. But he manages a few words. Are they coming back? That's his first question. Not, help me. Not, I need a medic. But, are they coming back? Because if they're coming back, he's ready to keep fighting. So, after 4 hours, after losing his hand, after bleeding for hours, ready to fight, Bura has to tell him, no, they're gone. It's over. You held. You stopped them. Gurung nods, finally allows himself to relax. Slightly. Just slightly. His left hand releases the rifle. The weapon falls to his lap. That's when the pain hits. Really hits. The adrenaline is fading. The shock is setting in. His body realizes what's happened to it. The destroyed hand. The missing eye. The dozens of shrapnel wounds. The burns. The blood loss. He doesn't cry out. Doesn't scream. Just closes his one remaining eye and breathes slowly. Staying conscious through pure willpower. Bura and the other Gurkhas pull him carefully from the trench. Place him on a stretcher. Apply field dressings to his wounds. Give him water. Inject morphine for the pain. Then they look around the trench. And what they see stuns them into silence. Empty shell casings everywhere. Dozens of them. Evidence of continuous firing for hours. Blood soaking the ground. Some of it Gurung's. Some of it from Japanese soldiers who got close enough to bleed into his position. And bodies. So many bodies. Japanese soldiers lying in front of the trench. Piled in some places. Scattered in others. All of them dead or dying. They start counting. 1 body. 2, 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 31. 31 confirmed dead enemy soldiers within a few yards of Gurung's trench. All killed by rifle fire. All killed by one man. Blood trails leading away into the jungle show where wounded Japanese were dragged away by their comrades. How many wounded? Unknown. But the blood trails are numerous, widespread. At least 20, maybe more. One Gurkha soldier stares at the scene and says aloud what everyone is thinking. How is this possible? No one answers. Because there is no answer. It shouldn't be possible. Every rule of combat says it's impossible. But the evidence is right in front of them. One man, one hand, 4 hours, 31 dead enemies. An entire Japanese assault stopped cold. Bura immediately starts writing his report. He knows this needs to be documented. Needs to be recorded exactly as it happened. Because if he just told people the story, they wouldn't believe it. They'd think he was exaggerating, inflating the numbers, making it sound more dramatic than it was. But the numbers don't need inflating. The truth is dramatic enough. As they carry Gurung away on the stretcher, toward medical treatment and evacuation, other Gurkhas come forward to look at the trench, to see the battlefield, to understand what happened. They walk among the Japanese bodies, count them again, examine the positions, try to reconstruct the battle. And every single one of them reaches the same conclusion. This shouldn't have been possible. This defies explanation. This is beyond anything they've seen in years of combat. But it happened. The evidence is undeniable. The bodies don't lie. As the sun climbs higher, illuminating the entire battlefield, the scale of what Gurung accomplished becomes clear. One trench, one man, against impossible odds. He held. When he should have died in the first minute, he held. When blood loss should have made him unconscious, he held. When pain should have broken him, he held. For 4 hours. For his brothers. For his duty. The dawn reveals the truth. Sometimes one man can change everything. Sometimes courage is enough. Sometimes duty trumps death. Lashiman Gurung proved it. On May 13, 1945. In a muddy trench in Burma. As the sun rose on the impossible. 465 years after that night in Burma, people ask Lashiman Gurung the same question. Journalists, historians, military researchers, fellow soldiers, young Gurkhas, strangers who hear his story. They all ask the same thing. How did you do it? How did you fight for 4 hours with one hand? How did you operate a rifle designed for 2 hands? How did you aim with one eye? How did you stay conscious with massive blood loss? How did you kill 31 enemy soldiers? How did you survive? Oh, Gurung's answer never changes. He says it in interviews, at commemorations, in ceremonies, to researchers, to anyone who asks. I was a Gurkha. I had my duty. I did what needed doing. That's all. No dramatic explanation. No secret technique. No special training. Just duty. People press him. They want more. They want to understand the mechanism, the psychology, the method. They ask, but what were you thinking during those 4 hours? Gurung says, I was thinking about the next shot, the next target, keeping them away from my brothers. Were you afraid? Fear is always there. But duty is stronger than fear. Did you think you would die? Yes, but I would die doing my job. How did you handle the pain? The pain was there, but it didn't matter. My job mattered. What kept you conscious when blood loss should have killed you? My brothers were behind me. If I fell, they died. I couldn't let that happen. These answers frustrate researchers. They're too simple, too straightforward. They don't explain the physiological impossibility of what Gurung did. But maybe that's the point. Maybe there is no complex explanation. Maybe it really is that simple. Duty, brotherhood, refusing to quit. Military psychologists study Gurung's case for decades. They want to understand what allows certain soldiers to perform beyond human limits under extreme stress. They develop theories, create models, write papers. One theory, Gurung entered a dissociative state. His mind separated from his body's pain signals, allowed him to function despite catastrophic injuries. Another theory, extreme adrenaline and stress hormones created a temporary superhuman state, enhanced strength, speed, pain tolerance beyond normal levels. A third theory, Gurung's training created automatic responses. Muscle memory took over. He didn't have to think, his body just did what it was trained to do. All of these theories have merit. All of them are partially true. But none of them fully explain what happened. Because at the core, Gurung's survival and success came down to something that can't be measured, can't be quantified, can't be replicated in a laboratory. The human will to accomplish a mission, to protect others, to fulfill duty, to refuse defeat. This isn't unique to Gurung. Throughout history, soldiers have performed impossible feats when pushed to the limit, when everything is on the line, when failure means death, not just their own death but the death of their brothers. World War II is full of similar stories. Soldiers holding impossible positions, fighting despite terrible wounds, achieving things that shouldn't be possible. But Gurung's stand is exceptional even among these stories. Because of the duration, 4 hours. Because of the severity of his wounds. Because of the odds, 200 to 1. Because of the documented evidence, 31 confirmed kills. The question, how did you do it, is really asking, are you superhuman? Do you have abilities normal people don't have? And Gurung's answer, I was a Gurkha. I had my duty, is saying, no, I'm not superhuman. I'm just a soldier who refused to fail. That's the uncomfortable truth for people who ask the question. They want Gurung to be special, different, unique. Because if he's just an ordinary soldier who did extraordinary things through willpower and duty, then it means any of us could be called upon to do the same. And most of us aren't sure we could. Most of us hope we never have to find out. But Gurung's message, intentional or not, is clear. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing your job despite fear. Heroism isn't about special abilities. It's about refusing to quit when quitting would be easier. Duty isn't complex. Duty is simple. You have a job. You do it. Everything else is secondary. In 1995, during Victoria Cross commemorations in London, a young British soldier asks Gurung, what advice would you give to soldiers today? Gurung thinks for a moment, then says, know your duty, trust your training, never leave your brothers. That's all you need. The young soldier looks disappointed. He wants more, some secret wisdom, some profound insight. But Gurung has given him everything. The truth is simple. Execution is what's hard. Years later, that same soldier, now an officer, tells the story to his own troops. He says, Gurung didn't have a secret. He just had absolute commitment to doing his job. That's what made him exceptional. Not his abilities, his commitment. How did Lashiman Gurung do the impossible? He decided it had to be done. And then he did it, one shot at a time. 1 breath at a time, 1 second at a time, for 4 hours. That's how. There's no magic, no secret, just duty, courage, and an absolute refusal to fail. The question everyone asks has the simplest answer, and the hardest answer to accept, because accepting it means admitting, maybe we're capable of more than we think. Maybe our limits aren't as fixed as we believe. Maybe duty and will can overcome almost anything. Maybe the impossible is just difficult. And Lashiman Gurung proved it. Lashiman Gurung's stand at Tong Da isn't the only impossible last stand in World War II. Throughout the war, soldiers on all sides performed acts of courage that defied belief. Let's look at a few and see how Gurung's action compares. Audie Murphy, January 1945, near Holtzwihr, France. American soldier. His company is being overrun by German infantry and tanks. Murphy sends his men to safety, then climbs onto a burning tank destroyer that could explode any second. Uses the vehicle's machine gun to hold off 250 German soldiers for an hour. Kills 50 enemies. Survives. Incredible action. Earned the Medal of Honor. But Murphy had both hands. Both eyes. Wasn't wounded during the engagement. Had a machine gun, not a bolt-action rifle. John Basilone. October 1942. Guadalcanal. American Marine. Japanese forces attack his position with 3,000 troops. Basilone's machine gun unit, 15 men, holds them off all night. Basilone personally operates 2 machine guns. Kills over 38 enemies. Survives. Extraordinary courage. Medal of Honor. But Basilone had a crew helping him. Had machine guns. Wasn't fighting alone. Wasn't wounded. Yogendra Singh Yadav. July 1999. Not World War II but worth mentioning. Indian soldier during Kargil War. Shot 15 times while climbing a cliff under enemy fire. Uses grenades and rifle to kill 4 enemy soldiers. Survives. Earns India's highest military honor. Remarkable. But the engagement lasted minutes, not hours. And he had both hands throughout. Franz Stigler and Charlie Brown. December 1943. A German fighter pilot encounters a badly damaged American B-17 bomber. Instead of shooting it down, Stigler escorts it to safety. Acts of mercy in war are rare. This one is famous. Noble. Humanitarian. But not a combat action. Different kind of courage. Desmond Doss. May 1945. Okinawa. American medic. Refuses to carry a weapon due to religious beliefs. During a brutal battle, single-handedly lowers 75 wounded soldiers down a cliff to safety. Under constant fire. Earns Medal of Honor. Incredible bravery. Saved lives rather than taking them. But Doss wasn't wounded. Wasn't fighting. Was rescuing. Compare these to Gurkha. Duration. 4 hours of continuous combat. Longer than most firefights. Longer than Barcelona's stand. Longer than Murphy's stand. Injuries. Right hand destroyed in the first minute. Right eye gone. Massive blood loss. Continued fighting for 4 hours after these injuries. None of the other examples involve continuing combat after catastrophic wounds. Odds? 200 to 1. Possibly 250 to 1. Comparable to Murphy and Barcelona's odds. But they had crew-served weapons. Gurkha had a bolt-action rifle. Weapon limitations. A rifle designed for 2 hands. Operated with 1 hand. For 4 hours. None of the other examples involve this kind of physical impossibility. Confirmed kills 31. Plus at least 20 wounded. Murphy killed 50 but had a machine gun. Barcelona killed 38 but had machine guns and a crew. Gurkha killed 31 with a bolt-action rifle in 1 hand. Support. Gurkha fought completely alone after his 2 trenchmates were wounded. No crew. No reinforcements. No resupply. Isolated 100 yards ahead of friendly lines. Survival. Survived wounds that should have killed him. Stayed conscious when blood loss should have rendered him unconscious. Operated effectively when shock should have shut down his nervous system. Every one of these soldiers deserves immense respect. Every one of them earned their medals. Every one of them did something extraordinary. But Gurkha's stand is unique because of the combination of factors. Catastrophic wounds suffered early and fighting continued for hours. Physical impossibility of one-handed rifle operation. Complete isolation with no support. Documented high kill count. Medical impossibility of survival and consciousness. Military historians who study last stands and defensive actions place Gurkha's stand in a category of its own. Not because he's better than other soldiers, but because the specific combination of challenges he overcame is unmatched. There's a saying in military circles, everyone has a breaking point. The question is whether you reach it before your mission is complete. Murphy reached his limit after the Germans retreated. Mission accomplished. Barcelona reached his limit when reinforcements arrived. Mission accomplished. Doss reached his limit when all wounded were evacuated. Mission accomplished. Gurkha's mission was complete at dawn when the Japanese withdrew. He reached his limit at exactly that moment. Not before. Not after. Exactly when the mission was done. That timing, that precision, that's what makes soldiers legendary. Lasting exactly as long as needed. Not giving up 1 second too soon. In 2010, when Gurkha died, military units around the world honored him. British Gurkha regiments. Indian Gurkha regiments. Even the Japanese Self-Defense Force acknowledged his courage. Because soldiers recognize extraordinary courage when they see it. Regardless of nationality. Regardless of which side someone fought on. Gurkha didn't diminish other soldiers' courage by being exceptional. He elevated what soldiers everywhere are capable of when pushed beyond all limits. His stand proves that humans can endure more than science says, can fight longer than training predicts, can survive what medicine says is fatal. If willpower is strong enough, if duty is clear enough, if the stakes are high enough, other impossible stands in World War II are remembered and honored, as they should be. But Lashiman Gurkha's stand at Tongdor remains in a class of its own. Not the only impossible stand, just the most impossible one. After May 13, 1945, Lashiman Gurkha becomes more than just a soldier. He becomes a symbol. A living monument to what humans are capable of when duty demands everything. Young Gurkhas joining the 8th Gurkha Rifles learn about him during basic training. Instructors tell his story. Not as entertainment, not as propaganda, as truth, as example, as standard. This is what a Gurkha does when tested, they say. This is the level of commitment expected. This is what the motto means, better to die than be a coward. Gurung visits training camps occasionally, meets new recruits. They see him, an old man missing a hand and an eye, and they understand. The cost is real. The sacrifice is real. But so is the glory. So is the honor. So is the pride. One young recruit asks him, "Do you regret that night? Do you wish it hadn't happened?" Gurung thinks for a long moment, then says, "I regret the war. I regret that men died. But I don't regret doing my duty. My brothers survived. That's what matters." British military academies study his action. Sandhurst includes it in tactical training. How to defend a position against overwhelming odds. How to maximize the effectiveness of limited resources. How to make every shot count. American military academies study him too. West Point, Annapolis, the Air Force Academy. His story appears in textbooks, in case studies, in lectures about leadership under extreme stress. Not because his tactics were brilliant, they were simple defensive tactics, but because his execution under impossible circumstances provides insights into human performance that can't be gained any other way. Sports psychologists study his mental state. How did he maintain focus for 4 hours while in pain and losing blood? What mental techniques allowed him to override physical limitations? Medical researchers study his survival. How did his body continue functioning when it should have shut down? What can be learned about stress hormones, pain management, and the mind-body connection? But perhaps Gurung's most important legacy is simpler, more personal, more universal. Every person who hears his story, soldier or civilian, asks themselves the same question: what would I do in that situation? Would I have his courage, his commitment, his refusal to quit? Most people hope they never have to find out. But knowing his story plants a seed. Maybe we're stronger than we think. Maybe we're capable of more than we believe. Maybe when the moment comes, we'll rise to meet it. Gurung's story isn't just about war. It's about human potential. About what's possible when everything is on the line. Parents tell their children about him. Teachers use his story in schools. Not to glorify war. Gurung himself never glorified war. But to illustrate courage, duty, commitment, sacrifice. In Nepal, he's a national hero. His village, once just a poor farming community, is now known as the birthplace of a Victoria Cross recipient. Children grow up knowing his name, his legacy. In Britain, where Gurkhas have served for over 200 years, Gurung represents the best of that partnership. A soldier from Nepal who fought for Britain with a loyalty and courage that's difficult to comprehend. After his death in 2010, both Nepal and Britain hold memorials. Political leaders attend. Military units send representatives. Gurkha veterans gather to honor one of their own. The eulogies speak of courage, of duty, of sacrifice, but they also speak of something else, inspiration. Because Gurung's story doesn't end with his death. It continues in every soldier who remembers his example. Every young Gurkha who takes up the kukri knife and swears to uphold the motto. Every person who faces an impossible situation and decides to keep fighting. His Victoria Cross is displayed in museums. His photographs hang in military facilities. His story is told and retold. But the real monument to Lakshman Gurung isn't bronze or stone. It's not in a museum or on a battlefield. It's in the hearts of people who hear his story and think, maybe I can be that strong. Maybe I can endure. Maybe I can do what needs doing no matter how impossible it seems. That's his legacy. Not just what he did on one night in 1945. But what his example inspires others to do in their own moments of crisis. Soldiers facing overwhelming odds remember, Gurung faced worse and held. People dealing with pain remember, Gurung suffered worse and continued. Anyone tempted to quit remembers, Gurung had every reason to quit and refused. His story becomes a touchstone, a reference point, a reminder of what humans are capable of. In 2015, 70 years after that night at Tongda, the British Army hosts a special commemoration. Veterans gather. Speeches are given. Gurung's granddaughter accepts an award on behalf of the family. A retired British general says this: Lakshman Gurung proved that one person can make a difference. That impossible is just a word. That duty and courage can overcome any obstacle. His legacy isn't just military. It's human. It's universal. It's eternal. Those words capture what Gurung means to history. Not just a soldier who did something extraordinary, but a human being who showed what all humans might be capable of when tested. His story will be told for generations, as long as there are soldiers, as long as there are people who face impossible challenges, as long as someone needs an example of courage and duty. The trench at Tongda is gone, reclaimed by jungle. The battlefield has vanished. The physical evidence of that night has eroded, but the story remains. The legend endures. The inspiration continues. One man, one hand, one impossible stand, one eternal legacy. Lashiman Gurung, rifleman, Gurkha, hero, legend. Better to die than be a coward. He proved it, and we remember. Who was Lashiman Gurung when he wasn't being a hero? When he wasn't wearing his Victoria Cross? When he was just a man living in a village in Nepal? The world knows Gurung the soldier, Gurung the warrior, Gurung the legend who killed 31 enemy soldiers with one hand. But few know Gurung the husband, the father, the grandfather, the man who struggled to button his shirt every morning because he only had one hand. After the war, Gurung returns to Nepal. He marries. His wife's name is rarely mentioned in historical records. She remains private, away from the spotlight. But she's the one who helps him adjust to civilian life, who helps him dress, who cooks for him when his one hand can't manage certain tasks. She's the one who wakes him from nightmares, who holds him when the memories become too much, who gives him space when he needs to be alone with his thoughts. They have children. Gurung is a quiet father, doesn't talk much about the war, doesn't tell his children stories about combat. They grow up knowing their father did something important during the war, but the details remain vague for years. One of his daughters later recalls, "Father never bragged, never showed off his medal. He kept it in a box, only brought it out for official ceremonies. At home he was just our father, gentle, patient, sometimes sad. That sadness is the war, the ghosts he carries, the memories that never fade." His children learn to recognize the look in his one remaining eye, the distant stare. They know he's back in Burma, back in that trench, reliving that night. His grandchildren are fascinated by his missing hand and eye. Young children don't understand the concept of war yet. They just see their grandfather as different from other people. One grandchild asks, "Grandfather, where did your hand go?" Gurung says simply, "I lost it in the war." Did it hurt? Yes. Does it still hurt? Sometimes. Mostly here. He points to his heart. The grandchild doesn't understand. But one day when he's older and learns the full story, he will. Gurung struggles financially for much of his life. The British pension for Victoria Cross recipients is small, especially by the time it reaches Nepal. He can't do physical labor, can't farm effectively, takes odd jobs when he can, accepts help from family and community. This is the reality for many war heroes. The medals and honors don't pay bills, don't put food on the table, don't make daily life easier. But Gurung never complains, never asks for special treatment, never uses his status as a hero to demand anything. When the British government finally increases pensions for Gurkha veterans in the 1990s, Gurung's financial situation improves. He can live more comfortably, can help his children and grandchildren, can stop worrying about basic survival. But the money doesn't erase the pain, doesn't bring back his hand or his eye, doesn't stop the nightmares. Gurung finds peace in simple things, sitting in the sun, watching his grandchildren play, talking with other veterans who understand what he went through. Prayer and meditation. His Hindu faith gives him comfort. He's not religious in a showy way, doesn't preach, but he visits the temple regularly, offers prayers, seeks peace for the souls of the men he killed, both Allied soldiers who died in Burma and Japanese soldiers who fell at his position. This surprises some people. Why would he pray for enemy soldiers? Gurung's answer, they were soldiers doing their duty like me. They had families. They didn't choose the war. I killed them because I had to, but I can honor their sacrifice. I can ask that they find peace. This compassion, this ability to see humanity in enemies, marks Gurung as exceptional not just as a soldier but as a human being. When journalists interview him in later years, they expect a tough, hardened warrior. What they find is a gentle old man who speaks softly, who chooses his words carefully, who shows no arrogance, no pride, just quiet dignity. One journalist asks, "Do you consider yourself a hero?" Gurung says, "I consider myself a soldier who did his job. The word hero? That's for other people to decide. I just did what I was trained to do. But you did more than your job. You did the impossible. The impossible is just what needs doing when there's no other choice." His humility is genuine, not false modesty. He truly doesn't see himself as special. In his mind, any Gurkha would have done the same in his position. When he attends military ceremonies and events, he's uncomfortable with attention, prefers to stand in the back. Let younger soldiers take the spotlight. Only comes forward when specifically asked. At one Victoria Cross reunion in London, Queen Elizabeth II speaks with him personally, asks about his health, his family, his life in Nepal. Gurung is respectful but not overly formal. He treats the Queen like any other person, with courtesy, with honesty. When she asks if there's anything he needs, he says, "Just that Gurkha soldiers continue to be treated with respect and fairness. That's all I ask." The Queen remembers this conversation for years. Later tells military officials, "That Gurkha soldier taught me something about true humility. He has every right to demand much. He asks for almost nothing." This is Lakshman Gurung, not the legend, not the hero of history books, just a man, a good man, who happened to do something extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. A man who lost his hand and eye defending his brothers, who lived with pain and nightmares for 65 years, who raised a family, who found moments of peace, who remained humble despite having every right to be proud. The man behind the medal is in many ways more impressive than the legend, because the legend is about one night, 4 hours of impossible courage. But the man is about 65 years of quiet strength, daily courage, living with loss, carrying ghosts, and never complaining, never giving up, never losing his humanity. That's the real Lakshman Gurung, soldier, hero, legend, and most importantly, a good man who did his duty and lived with the consequences. When Lakshman Gurung went to war in 1940, he left behind a family in Nepal. When he returned in 1945, he brought the war back with him. Not literally, but in his mind, in his nightmares, in his pain. And his family paid the price for his heroism too. This is the part of war stories that rarely gets told. The families, the wives, the children, the people who live with the aftermath every single day. Gurung's wife, whose name history rarely records because women's stories from this era are often overlooked. She becomes a caregiver, not just a wife. She helps her husband with basic tasks he can no longer do alone. Buttoning shirts, cutting food, tasks requiring 2 hands. But that's the easy part, the physical assistance. The hard part is the emotional toll. Living with a man who wakes up screaming in the middle of the night, who has episodes where he's back in Burma, back in that trench, who sits for hours staring at nothing, lost in memories. She can't reach him during those times, can't pull him back. She just has to wait, let him work through it, be there when he returns to the present. This takes a toll on any spouse, the constant vigilance, the worry, the knowledge that your partner carries pain you can't fix, wounds you can't heal, and the financial strain. For years the family struggles. The British pension is small. Gurung can't work normally. The family relies on relatives, on community support, on sacrifices. His wife works, takes whatever job she can find, keeps the household running, raises the children largely on her own because their father is physically present but emotionally distant much of the time. Does she resent this? The historical record doesn't say, but it would be understandable if she did. She didn't choose war, didn't choose heroism, but she lives with the consequences every day. The children grow up with a father who is there but not fully there. He loves them, that's clear. But he struggles to connect emotionally. The war has built walls inside him, barriers he can't fully lower even for his own children. One of his daughters later recalls, "We knew father loved us, but there was always a distance, a part of him we couldn't reach, a part that stayed in the war." The children learn not to make sudden loud noises. Father doesn't like loud noises. They startle him. Trigger responses. Once a child slams a door accidentally. Gurung drops to the floor, covering his head. Thinks he's under attack. The children are scared. Don't understand why their father does this. Mother explains, your father was in a war. Sometimes his mind goes back there. Be patient with him. They learn. They adapt. They become careful, quiet, watchful of their father's moods. Is this fair to them? No, but it's the reality. This is what war does, not just to soldiers, but to families, to children, to generations. When Gurung attends military ceremonies or events in Britain, he's gone for weeks sometimes. The family waits, worries, hopes he returns safely, hopes the attention and memories don't make his nightmares worse. Usually they do. After every trip to Britain, after every ceremony, after every interview where he has to relive that night in Burma, the nightmares increase. The distant episodes become more frequent. His wife shoulders this burden silently. Because what choice does she have? This is her husband, the father of her children. She committed to him. She stays. The grandchildren have an easier relationship with Gurung. They're a generation removed. They see him as the gentle old man who tells them stories, who lets them play, who doesn't demand much. They don't carry the weight their parents carried. Don't remember the worst years when Gurung struggled most with his demons. But they notice things. Grandfather only has one hand. Grandfather can't see well. Grandfather gets quiet sometimes and stares at nothing. As they grow older and learn about the war, about what their grandfather did, they understand better. Some feel pride. Some feel sadness. Some feel both. One grandson later says, I'm proud of what grandfather did, but I'm also sad for what it cost him. Cost our family. The medals and honor, they're important, but they don't heal wounds. Don't bring back what was lost. This is the uncomfortable truth about heroism. We celebrate the act, honor the courage, award the medals, but we rarely acknowledge the cost, not just to the hero, but to everyone around them. The families who live with the aftermath, who sacrificed their own peace for the hero's service. Gurung's family never asked for recognition, never demanded anything. They just quietly supported him, helped him survive, gave him a reason to keep living when the pain became too much. Without them, Gurung might not have survived those 65 years after the war. The physical wounds would have healed, but the mental wounds? Those require love, support, patience, family. In 2010, when Gurung dies, his family mourns. But there's also relief. Not relief that he's gone, but relief that he's finally at peace. That the nightmares have stopped. That the pain has ended. At his funeral, his wife sits quietly. Doesn't speak much. She's elderly now. Tired. She gave her whole life to supporting a hero. To carrying burdens most people never see. Someone asks her, are you proud of your husband? She thinks for a long moment. Then says, I'm proud of him. I love him. But I wish the war had never happened. I wish he had come home whole. I wish our life had been different. Then she adds, but he did his duty, and I did mine. That's all any of us can do. That might be the most honest statement about military service ever spoken. The soldier does his duty. The family does theirs. Both pay prices. Both make sacrifices. Gurung's heroism is remembered. His Victoria Cross is displayed in museums. His story is taught in military academies. But his family's sacrifice? That's footnoted, mentioned briefly, then overlooked. Yet without that sacrifice, without his wife's support, his children's patience, his family's love, the hero wouldn't have survived to inspire future generations. This is the hidden cost of war, the invisible sacrifice, the price paid by people who never wore uniforms, never held weapons, never saw combat, but who served nonetheless, in their own way, for their own reasons. Lashiman Gurung's family served, for 65 years, in quiet ways, with little recognition. They deserve to be remembered too. December 12, 2010. Lashiman Gurung wakes up in his home in Nepal. He's 92 years old. His body is failing. Age has caught what the Japanese couldn't kill 65 years ago. He's been sick for weeks. His family has been caring for him, taking turns sitting with him, making sure he's comfortable, preparing for the inevitable. Gurung knows he's dying. He's made peace with it, lived far longer than he expected, far longer than anyone who saw his wounds in 1945 expected. Every day for 65 years has been borrowed time, a gift. He's grateful for it, grateful for his family, for the years he had, for the peace he eventually found. His children and grandchildren gather. They want to be with him at the end. Want to hear his voice one more time. Want to say goodbye properly. One of his grandsons asks, "Grandfather, are you afraid?" Gurung smiles slightly. Says, "I faced death many times. It holds no fear for me now. I've lived a full life. Done my duty. My time has come." What do you want people to remember about you? Gurung thinks about this. It's the same question he's been asked 1,000 times in interviews, ceremonies, conversations. But now, at the end, his answer is different. Remember that duty matters. That courage is possible even when you're afraid. That one person can make a difference. But mostly, remember that I was just a soldier. Nothing more. Nothing less. His family stays with him through the day, talking quietly, sharing memories, laughing sometimes, crying sometimes. Gurung drifts in and out of consciousness. When he's awake, he's present, alert. When he sleeps, his family doesn't know if he'll wake again. At one point, he wakes suddenly, looks around confused. His daughter asks, "Father, what is it?" He says quietly, "I thought I heard grenades. I thought I was back there." Even now, even at 92, even on his deathbed, the war is still with him, still in his mind, still real. His daughter holds his one remaining hand, says, "It's okay, Father. You're home. You're safe. The war is over." Gurung nods, closes his one eye, says, "The war is never over. Not for soldiers. But soon it will be." As evening comes, his breathing becomes labored, shallow. His family knows these are his final hours. They take turns speaking to him, telling him they love him, thanking him for being their father, their grandfather, assuring him it's okay to let go. Gurung listens, can't speak much now, but he hears them, understands, squeezes their hands when he can. As night falls, his breathing slows further. His family surrounds the bed, praying, crying, holding him. And then, peacefully, Lashiman Gurung takes his last breath. The war hero, the Victoria Cross recipient, the legend who killed 31 enemy soldiers with one hand, the man who survived the impossible, dies quietly, at home, surrounded by family, at peace. His death is announced the next day. News spreads across Nepal, across Britain, across the military world. The British Ministry of Defense releases a statement. Rifleman Lashiman Gurung VC has passed away. His courage and devotion to duty represent the finest traditions of the Gurkha regiments. He will be remembered with honor and respect. The Gurkha Museum posts a tribute. A legend has passed. Better to die than be a coward. Rifleman Gurung proved those words true. May he rest in peace. Military units around the world lower flags to half-staff, hold moments of silence, honor a fallen warrior. But perhaps the most moving tribute comes from a Japanese veteran organization. They send a message to Gurung's family. We honor the courage of Rifleman Gurung. He was a worthy opponent, a true warrior. May his spirit find peace. From the soldiers he fought against 65 years ago. Respect, recognition, honor. Gurung's funeral follows Hindu tradition. His body is cremated, his ashes scattered in a sacred place. His Victoria Cross, which he never wore casually, only at official events, is preserved for future generations. Hundreds attend the funeral. Family, friends, Gurkha veterans, military officials from Britain and Nepal, common people from his village who knew him simply as a neighbor. The eulogies speak of courage, duty, sacrifice, but they also speak of the man, the gentle grandfather, the quiet neighbor, the humble hero who never bragged, never demanded recognition, just lived his life with dignity. One speaker says, Lashiman Gurung fought 2 wars. The first was in Burma in 1945. That war lasted 4 hours. He won. The second was in his mind for 65 years. That war never truly ended, but he survived it, day by day, year by year. That might be his greater victory. As the funeral concludes, young Gurkha soldiers stand at attention. Salute. Honor one of their greatest. A man who showed them what their motto really means. Better to die than be a coward. Gurung could have died in that trench in 1945. Should have died. Every law of medicine and combat says he should have died. But he didn't. He survived. Lived 65 more years. Raised a family. Inspired generations. showed the world what humans are capable of when duty demands everything. Now he rests. The pain is gone. The nightmares are over. The ghosts are quiet. Somewhere, if there's an afterlife, maybe he's reunited with the other two Gurkhas who were in that trench with him. The ones whose names history forgot. Maybe they're telling stories, sharing a meal, at peace finally. And maybe, just maybe, the 31 Japanese soldiers who died that night are there too. No longer enemies, just soldiers who did their duty, who can respect each other now that the war is truly over. Rifleman Gurkha lived 92 years, served his country, did his duty, survived the impossible, carried heavy burdens with grace, loved his family, inspired the world, and at the end he found peace. That's all any warrior can hope for, to do their duty, to survive if possible, to find peace eventually. Rifleman Rifleman Gurkha, 1917 to 2010 Victoria Cross recipient. Hero. Legend. Better to die than be a coward. He proved it. He lived it. He earned it. Rest in peace, warrior. Your battle is over. Your duty is done. Your legacy is eternal. What can we learn from Rifleman Gurkha's impossible stand? What lessons does his story teach that apply not just to soldiers, but to anyone facing impossible challenges? Military academies have studied his action for decades. They've extracted tactical lessons, strategic insights, training methodologies. But the deepest lessons aren't tactical. They're human. Lesson 1, your limits are not where you think they are. Gurkha believed he could fight with one hand. So he did. Medical science said his body should shut down from blood loss. His will said otherwise. We all have limits. Physical, mental, emotional. But those limits are often self-imposed, based on what we think we can handle, not what we can actually endure when we must. Gurkha didn't have the luxury of thinking about limits. He had a job. He did it. Everything else became irrelevant. How many times do we quit before we truly have to? How many times do we say, I can't, when we mean, I don't want to? Gurkha's story asks us, what could you accomplish if you stopped defining your limits beforehand? Lesson 2, pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Gurkha was in excruciating pain for 4 hours. The destroyed hand, the missing eye, the shrapnel wounds, the burns. The pain was undeniable. But he didn't let pain stop him. Didn't let it define his actions. Didn't let it control his choices. Pain happened to him, but he chose how to respond. He chose to keep fighting, to keep focused, to keep doing his job. We all experience pain, physical, emotional, psychological. The question isn't whether pain will come. It's how we respond when it does. Do we collapse? Do we quit? Or do we acknowledge the pain and keep moving? Gurkha kept moving for 4 hours. Not because he was superhuman, because stopping wasn't an option. Lesson 3, duty gives meaning to suffering. Why did Gurkha endure? Not for glory, not for medals, not for recognition, for his brothers, the men behind him who depended on him. His duty to them gave meaning to his suffering. When suffering has meaning, when there's a purpose beyond yourself, you can endure almost anything. People who survive extreme hardship often say the same thing. I survived for my family, for my children, for something bigger than myself. Purpose makes pain bearable. Duty gives strength when your body has none left. Gurkha's purpose was clear, protect his brothers. That clarity sustained him when everything else failed. What's your purpose? What would you endure for? Who would you fight for when fighting seems impossible? Lesson 4, one person can change everything. Gurkha was one man, in one trench, against 200 enemies. The odds were absurd. Victory should have been impossible. But he held. And because he held, 100 men behind him survived. The Japanese attack failed. The strategic situation changed. One person, one action. Ripple effects that spread far beyond that single moment. We often feel powerless, like our actions don't matter, like we're too small to make a difference. Gurkha was 4 foot 11 inches tall. He was literally small, but his impact was enormous. You don't need to be big. You don't need to be powerful. You need to be committed, to do your part, to hold your position, to refuse to quit. One person refusing to fail can inspire hundreds, can change outcomes, can alter history. Lesson 5, courage isn't the absence of fear. It's action despite fear. Gurung was afraid. He said so in interviews. Fear is always there, he said. But duty is stronger than fear. Brave people aren't fearless. They're people who act despite fear, who do what needs doing even when they're terrified. We all face moments of fear, professional challenges, personal crises, health scares, relationship problems, financial disasters. The question isn't whether you'll be afraid. You will be. The question is, what will you do with that fear? Let it paralyze you, or act despite it? Gurung acted despite fear for 4 hours. Not once, but continuously, repeatedly. Every few seconds making the choice to keep fighting instead of giving up. Courage isn't one big decision. It's 1,000 small ones, repeated over and over, until the crisis passes. Lesson 6. Humility magnifies greatness. After doing something impossible, Gurung could have been arrogant, could have demanded recognition, could have used his status for personal gain. He didn't. He remained humble his entire life, said he was just a soldier doing his job. That humility makes his achievement even more impressive, because it's genuine, not false modesty. He truly believed any Gurkha would have done the same. True greatness doesn't need to announce itself, doesn't need validation, doesn't need to be acknowledged to exist. Gurung did what he did regardless of whether anyone would know, whether he'd be honored, whether history would remember. He did it because it needed doing. That's all. These lessons apply to everyone, soldier or civilian, young or old, strong or weak. When you face your impossible moment, and you will, everyone does eventually, remember Lashiman Gurung. Remember that limits are negotiable, that pain can be endured, that duty gives meaning, that one person matters, that courage is action despite fear, that humility magnifies strength. Remember that a 4'11" soldier with one hand killed 31 enemy soldiers in 4 hours because he refused to quit. And ask yourself, what could I accomplish if I simply refused to quit? The answer might surprise you. Gurung's legacy isn't just his action. It's the questions his action forces us to ask ourselves. Am I doing everything I could do? Am I using my full potential? Am I letting fear or pain or doubt stop me from doing what I know I should do? Most of the time, the honest answer is no. We're not doing everything we could. We're not using our full potential. We are letting fear and pain and doubt control us. Gurung's story is an invitation to try harder, to endure longer, to push further, to discover what we're truly capable of when we stop defining our limits in advance. Not everyone will face 200 enemy soldiers, but everyone faces their own battles, their own trenches, their own impossible situations. The lessons are universal. The choice is personal. Will you hold your trench, or will you fall back before you truly have to? Lashiman Gurung held his for 4 hours, with one hand. What's your excuse? Today, right now, somewhere in the world, a soldier is facing an impossible situation. Outnumbered, outgunned, scared, wounded, wondering if they can keep going. And somewhere in their training, in their memory, in their heart, they remember Lashiman Gurung. Gurung's story hasn't faded with time. If anything, it's become more relevant, more powerful, more necessary. In Afghanistan, a British soldier holds a position against Taliban fighters. He's wounded. His unit is pinned down. Every instinct says retreat. But he remembers, Gurung held for 4 hours with one hand. I have both hands. I can hold. He holds. His unit survives. In training facilities across the world, instructors tell Gurung's story, not as ancient history, as current example, as proof of what's possible. At Fort Benning, at Sandhurst, at military academies in India, Australia, Singapore, Gurung's name is spoken with reverence. When you think you can't go on, instructors say, remember the Gurkha at Tongda. He went on. You can too. Navy SEALs undergoing Hell Week, 6 days of brutal physical and mental testing. They're told about Gurung. 4 hours is nothing compared to what he endured. Army Rangers, Marine Force Recon, Special Forces worldwide, elite units that pride themselves on mental toughness. They all study Gurung, not because they want to replicate his specific action, but because they want to understand his mindset, his commitment, his absolute refusal to fail. Modern warfare is different from 1945. Technology has advanced. Tactics have evolved. Weapons are more sophisticated. But the human element remains constant. Fear still exists, pain still hurts, death is still permanent, and soldiers still have to make the choice, keep fighting or give up. Gurung's story reminds modern soldiers that the choice is what matters. Not the technology, not the weapons, the choice to keep going when stopping would be easier. In 2021, during the fall of Kabul, American soldiers held positions at the airport. Chaos everywhere. Thousands of desperate people. Suicide bombers. Gunfire. Impossible situation. One Marine holding a checkpoint later said, "I thought about the Gurkha with one hand. If he could hold for 4 hours against 200 enemies, I could hold for a few more hours here." That thought kept me going. This is Gurung's legacy in action. Not abstract. Not theoretical. Real soldiers. Real situations. Real impact. Gurkha regiments still serve today. In the British Army. In the Indian Army. In the Singapore Police Force. These modern Gurkhas carry Gurung's story with them. Every new Gurkha recruit learns about him during training. They visit his memorial. They study his action. They understand, this is the standard. This is what a Gurkha can do when tested. The pressure of that legacy is immense. How do you live up to someone who did the impossible? But Gurkha soldiers don't see it as pressure. They see it as inspiration. As proof that the motto, "Better to die than be a coward," isn't just words. It's achievable. Gurung achieved it. In Nepal, young men still join the Gurkhas. Still compete for those limited positions. Still train to the same brutal standards. What? Partly for money. Partly for honor. But partly because of stories like Gurung's. Because they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Something with meaning. Something with legacy. Gurung's village, once just another poor farming community, now produces Gurkha soldiers at a higher rate than most other villages. Boys grow up hearing about the local hero. They want to follow in his footsteps. Not to do what he did, no one wants to lose a hand and eye, but to have his courage, his commitment, his honor. Female soldiers study Gurung too. His story isn't gender specific. It's about human potential. Women serving in combat roles, in militaries around the world, they face the same question. Can I push beyond my perceived limits? Gurung proved that size doesn't determine capability. That physical disadvantage can be overcome. That will matters more than strength. This resonates with women who are often smaller than male counterparts, who face doubts about their ability to perform in combat. Gurung's 4'11" frame and one-handed success proves that capability isn't about physical size. Medical personnel study Gurung too. Combat medics, trauma surgeons. They want to understand how he survived. What allowed his body to function when it shouldn't have. This research saves lives. Modern combat medicine, understanding stress response, pain management, trauma care, has been influenced by studies of extreme cases like Gurung's. Psychologists study his mental resilience. How did he maintain focus? What prevented psychological breakdown? What can be learned and taught? This research helps soldiers today. PTSD treatment, stress management, resilience training, all influenced partly by understanding extreme cases like Gurung's. He's been dead since 2010, but his influence grows. His story spreads. His lessons multiply. Every year, more soldiers hear about him. More people read his story. More lives are touched by his example. In 2023, a documentary about Gurkha soldiers features Gurung's story. Millions watch it. Comments pour in. I'm not a soldier, but this story makes me want to be better. If he could do that with one hand, I can handle my problems. This is what courage looks like. Real courage. Not movie courage. Real. The story transcends military boundaries. Inspires civilians, athletes, people facing illness, people dealing with disability, people struggling with life. Because at its core, Gurung's story isn't about war. It's about human potential. About refusing to quit. About doing what needs doing regardless of obstacles. A cancer patient undergoing chemotherapy watches the documentary. Thinks, he endured 4 hours of hell. I can endure this treatment. An athlete recovering from career-threatening injury reads Gurung's story. Thinks, he fought with one hand. I can rehabilitate this injury. A student facing impossible deadlines remembers, Gurung didn't quit. I won't either. This is how legends live. Not just in history books, not just in museums, but in hearts, in minds, in the choices people make when faced with their own impossible moments. Rifleman Gurkha died in 2010. But in 2024 he's more alive than ever. In the soldier holding an impossible position. In the person refusing to quit. In everyone who faces fear and acts anyway. His trench at Tongda is long gone. But his stand continues. Every day. In every person who hears his story and thinks, if he could do that, maybe I can do this. That's immortality. Not living forever in body, but living forever in impact, in inspiration, in legacy. Rifleman Gurkha's body died in 2010. His spirit, his example, his lesson, those will live as long as humans face impossible challenges, as long as courage matters, as long as duty means something. Forever. Let's go back to the beginning, to the core truth of this story. Strip away everything else and ask, what really happened on May 13, 1945? A 27-year-old soldier, 4 foot 11 inches tall, sitting in a muddy trench in Burma, defending his brothers, doing his job. A grenade explodes in his hand, takes his fingers, shatters his palm, destroys his eye, covers him in blood. Any normal person collapses here, dies here, gives up here, because the body can't continue, because the pain is too much, because death is inevitable. But Rifleman Gurkha isn't normal, not because he's superhuman, but because he's absolutely committed. He has a job, hold this trench. Behind him, 100 yards back, his brothers depend on him. If he fails, they die. That thought is unacceptable. So he grabs his rifle with his left hand, does something that shouldn't be physically possible, works the bolt one-handed, aims with one eye, fires accurately in pitch darkness. And he does this for 4 hours. 4 hours of continuous combat. 4 hours of pain and blood loss and shock. 4 hours of impossible. 200 Japanese soldiers attack his position. They should overrun it in minutes. But they can't. Because one wounded Gurkha refuses to let them pass. By dawn, 31 enemy soldiers lie dead around his trench. At least 20 more are wounded, dragged away by their comrades. One man caused 50-plus casualties among an enemy force 200 strong. The numbers don't lie. The bodies don't lie. The evidence doesn't lie. This happened. Exactly as described. Documented. Verified. Undeniable. One man. One hand. One eye. 4 hours. 31 confirmed kills. An entire assault stopped cold. This is Rifleman Gurkha's story. But it's more than just his story. It's a proof of concept. Proof that humans are capable of far more than we think. That limits are flexible. That we can overcome almost anything. It's proof that one person matters. That individual action has consequences. That holding your position, whatever that position is, changes outcomes. It's proof that courage is a choice. That duty gives strength. That brotherhood transcends self-preservation. Most importantly, it's proof that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Gurkha never claimed to be special. Never said he had abilities others lacked. He was just a soldier. A short one. A poor one. An ordinary one. Who did something utterly extraordinary when circumstances demanded it. This is the power of his story. Not that he was superhuman, but that he was human. Fully human. With all the limitations and weaknesses that implies. And still he held. For 4 hours. With one hand. If Rifleman Gurkha can do that, what can you do? What can any of us do when we stop defining our limits in advance? When we commit fully to our duty? When we refuse to accept defeat? The answer might be far more than we ever imagined. More than science says is possible. More than training prepares us for. More than we believe we're capable of. Gurkha didn't discover new abilities. He just used every ability he had. Every ounce of strength. Every second of endurance. Every gram of courage. Completely. Fully. Without reservation. No holding back. No saving anything for later. Everything. Right now. For 4 hours. That's the lesson. That's the legacy. That's the truth at the heart of this impossible story. When your moment comes, when you face your impossible situation, your overwhelming odds, your catastrophic circumstances, remember the Gurkha at Tongda. Remember that he had every reason to quit. Every justification for failure. Every excuse for giving up. And he gave up none of them. He just did his job. One shot at a time. 1 second at a time, until dawn came and the battle was won. One hand, one eye, one impossible stand, one eternal legend. Better to die than be a coward. Lashman Gurung proved those words in blood and pain and courage. And 80 years later, his proof still stands, still inspires, still challenges us to be better than we think we can be. This is the story of Rifleman Lashman Gurung, Gurkha, Victoria Cross recipient, hero, legend. But most importantly, a man who simply refused to fail, who did his duty when duty demanded everything. And in doing so, showed the world what one person with one hand can accomplish when they absolutely refuse to quit. May 13, 1945. A muddy trench. 4 hours of hell. One man who wouldn't die. 31 enemy bodies at dawn. Proof that the impossible is just difficult. And that courage, duty, and will can overcome anything. Anything at all. Better to die than be a coward. Better to stand than to run. Better to fight than to quit. Lashman Gurung stood and fought and held for 4 hours for his brothers, for his duty, for his honor, with one hand, with one eye, with a courage that defies comprehension. This is his story. This is his legacy. This is his gift to everyone who comes after. The knowledge that we're stronger than we know, braver than we think, more capable than we imagine. All we have to do is refuse to quit, just like he did. On one impossible night, in one impossible trench, against impossible odds, he held. And because he held, we remember, we learn, we're inspired. One man, one stand, one legend, forever. This is the story of Rifleman Lashman Gurung, born in poverty, told he was too short, joined the army anyway, went to war, came back missing a hand and an eye, carrying the Victoria Cross, carrying ghosts that never left. Lived 65 more years with quiet dignity, raised a family, inspired generations, died peacefully in 2010 at age 92. His trench is gone, the battlefield reclaimed by jungle, the physical evidence eroded by time, but the story remains, passed down, taught, remembered, because some actions transcend their moment, become timeless, become lessons for everyone who comes after. If this story moved you, if it inspired you, if it made you think about your own limits and your own potential, share it. Tell others. Keep the memory alive. Because stories like this need to be remembered, not to glorify war. Gurung himself never glorified war, but to remember what humans are capable of, what courage looks like, what duty means. Subscribe to this channel for more untold stories from World War II. Stories of courage, sacrifice, and extraordinary people doing extraordinary things in the darkest chapter of human history. Leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, your country, your city. Tell us what Gurung's story means to you, how it inspired you, what you'll remember. And most importantly, when your impossible moment comes, and it will come for everyone eventually, remember the Gurkha with one hand. Remember that he held his trench for 4 hours, killed 31 enemies, survived the impossible. Lived 65 more years, died at peace. Better to die than be a coward. Lashman Gurung lived those words, proved those words, earned those words. May his courage inspire us, his duty guide us, his refusal to quit strengthen us. May we all find the strength to hold our trenches, whatever those trenches may be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for honoring the sacrifice of soldiers like Lashman Gurung who gave everything for their brothers, who held the line when the line seemed impossible to hold. Their stories must never be forgotten. Rifleman Lashman Gurung, 1917 to 2010 Victoria Cross. One hand, one eye, one legend, forever.